Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
When Max and Dipter squared up, thankfully the pit members were doing a good job of keeping the other students out of the fight, which meant the two of them could finally face each other one-on-one, without distractions, without interference. Max moved in to fight, aiming to strike, and just as he got within range, Dipter lifted his leg. It was a fast kick. Max's body, he thought it could react in time, but as he raised his arm, a twitch of pain shot through his shoulder, the same shoulder that had betrayed him before. Dipter's leg crashed straight into his face, splitting his lip. He had to step back and reevaluate. That kick was no joke. If he were in his old body, he might have been able to power through it. But from that single hit, his head was already spinning. My shoulder's still not 100%, and even if I blocked that kick, it would have hurt, Max thought. I'm not in my old body. I can't just brute force my way through this. What? Did you think it'd be the same? Dipter said, sneering. I met a lot of guys like you, naturally good at fighting, so they think they're special until they meet me. Now, Dipter was the one charging forward, and once again, he went for a head kick. Max quickly ducked and moved, keeping out of range, narrowly avoiding the blow. Then, without warning, Dipter crossed his feet, spun, and kicked Max hard in the stomach with the side of his leg. It was the same devastating kick that had taken one of the pit members completely out of the fight. Immediately, Max doubled over, pain flooding through his body. Damn, I can't even remember the last time I was in this much pain. Not even when I got stabbed did it hurt this bad. Through blurred vision, Max saw Dipter's leg lift high into the air, his heel coming down fast. Max quickly rolled out of the way and watched as the heel crashed into the ground, leaving a deep imprint in the floor. These kids, was anyone this strong back when I was their age? Max thought, but he shook his head. Admiring Dipter wasn't going to get him out of this situation. Max kept moving, but it was getting hard to breathe. Dipter stayed on him relentlessly, throwing out stylish, powerful kicks, even spinning in the air like a whirlwind. This time, the kick came from the opposite side, and Max lifted his arm to block it. Even so, the force was too strong. He stumbled down onto one leg, forced to the side. Wolf was still watching everything, and now, he was starting to have second thoughts. If I were to evaluate that Max kid, I'd say he's an E-rank fighter, but there's a difference between him and someone like Joe. There's no hesitation in his movements. He can see the path to victory. In this fight, I thought he'd be pushed to his limits and evolve into a D-rank. But this fight, it might just be too much for him. Max got up. He forced himself to, just like he had so many times before. As he stood to his feet, he continued dodging Dipter's rapid kicks. The kid's right. I never actually learned how to fight properly. I dabbled in everything, here and there, never focusing on one style. I was just talented, and that's what got me to the top. So far, the only thing I've been able to rely on is experience, and that's what I'm going to have to count on now. With that thought, Max started to unravel one of the wraps on his hand. He'd been watching Dipter closely, and because things had been going so well for him, Dipter's movements had started getting flashier. As Max closed the distance, Dipter spun again and leapt into the air to deliver another kick. But this time, the kick was met with Max whipping off his jacket and hurling it straight into Dipter's face. The jacket covered him, and Dipter felt his kick hit nothing but air. Right after, he felt a heavy thud crash in his body. He'd been tackled at the legs. All those fancy moves make it easy to hit you off balance. Max shouted as he brought Dipter down to the ground. He mounted him, and without wasting a second, drove his fist deep into Dipter's stomach, winding him. Then, Max didn't let up. He punched Dipter in the face again and again. Dipter was dazed, stunned by the sudden onslaught, and shocked that after taking so many hits, Max still had this much fight in him. I'm only going to have the advantage for a short while. I have to take him out while I can, Max thought, quickly tying the loosened wrap around Dipter's neck before rolling to the side. He repositioned himself, so he was on the ground, one leg pressed firmly against Dipter's back, pulling both ends of the wrap. He was strangling Dipter. At first, Dipter kicked backward in a panic, but his strikes missed, and Max only pulled harder. No hesitation. Wolf thought to himself. The fear, the thought that you might actually kill someone, it usually ran through a person's head. But not for this Max. Max pulled even harder as Dipter struggled. His body weakened, and finally Max let go. Max got up from the floor and ran forward, kicking Dipter hard in the back of the head. He didn't care if Dipter got a concussion or not. This was someone who took pleasure, who felt no sorrow in the death of children. Right after, Max stepped up to Dipter and slammed his foot down onto his ankle. Then again, and again, he lifted his foot and drove it into the same spot, making sure Dipter wouldn't be using those fancy kicks anytime soon. Max was huffing and puffing, breath heavy as Dipter lay crumpled on the ground, but he wasn't finished yet. He walked over and grabbed Dipter by the shirt, lifting his upper half and locking eyes with him. People like you eventually get what's coming to them, one way or another, Max said. I was no different. I'm just the one delivering it to you. But I know it doesn't end with you. Tell me, Max shouted, shaking Dipter. Tell me who ordered you to do this. Who's behind all of it? It was clear that the fight was over for Dipter and his crew of delinquents he had managed to build up, but this wasn't just some sort of revenge that Max was aiming to seek. There was a true reason why he had done this, to find out the truth. Dipter, you've lost this. Now answer me, Max said as he pulled on Dipter's shirt even higher, lifting him just a bit more off the ground. Dipter could tell by the condition of his ankle that he couldn't fight anymore. He wasn't even sure if he would be able to walk himself out of here if he tried. And yet he still had a smile on his face, even now, even after everything. Haha. And if I tell you, what would be the point? You're just going to hit me again, right? Dipter said, letting out a shaky breath. Max then dropped Dipter back onto the ground and lifted up his hand. He gripped his entire finger tightly in that moment, his eyes fixed with a cold stare. You're right, Max said, and then pulled down hard, breaking and cracking it in a single motion. It's easy for you right now. All you have to do is give me a name, and you don't have to suffer anymore. Do you think whoever hired you to do all of this would go through all of this for you? Your loyalty is not rewarded. Max was already going for another finger until he heard Dipter shout. Wait, Dipter said, managing to just pull his arm out to stop him. It's not loyalty. I couldn't give a crap about that guy. But do you think knowing who it was would make a difference? If I told you, you'd feel helpless like there's nothing you could do. You don't know the kind of backing this person has. Currently, Max had no idea that Dipter had already decided to turn against his client. What Dipter was trying to do now was hold something over Max, to shake him, to make him feel fear. There was a reason, after all, why Dipter had felt like he could act the way he did, without consequences. But in this situation, Max had already done what he believed he needed to do to get the answers he came here for. He lifted Dipter by his shirt once more and leaned in close, his voice low as he whispered in his ear. Is it a member of the Stern family? Max asked. Dipter's eyes lit up instantly. If Max had known this the whole time, then why had he gone through all of this? How did he even know in the first place? What was Max's relationship to the Stern family for things to go this far? Your reaction says it all to me. Dipter, you are the one who has no clue what's going on here. You think you're a leader, but the whole time you were just being used as a pawn, Max stated. Dipter made a scowl. He clearly didn't like that. Max could tell the kind of person he was. Not a follower, but someone who wanted to build his own empire. That's how he had climbed to the position he was in now. You're lucky I don't like the man. Otherwise, even if you broke all my fingers, I wouldn't say anything. The man's name is Chad Stern. Immediately, Max let go of Dipter, dropping him to the ground. Flashes of images raced through his mind. Out of all the Sterns, there was one who had already angered him the most, and it was Chad Stern. He had acted up at the party, ordering Max around the whole time, showing off in flashy clothes, full of arrogance, treating both Max and Aaron like loyal dogs. Is that why he acted like that at the party? Because he already knew everything that was going on at the school? The truth wasn't so surprising to Max. He had suspected it was a family member. He also knew Dipter wouldn't understand the real reason for Chad's actions. But that's when another thought suddenly hit him. Was it you? Max asked, locking eyes with Dipter again. Was it you who took me to the lake? To Notting Hill? To Cure Lake? Wolf was still paying close attention to everyone in the area. Out of all the students, Jay was down on his knees. He was still able to fight, technically, but it was clear there was no will left in him. What really caught Wolf's attention, though, was the way Aaron's entire body tensed up when he heard the mention of the lake. Just what is going on with these people? This is getting more interesting by the second. Wolf giggled to himself. Lake? Notting Hill. I have no idea what you're talking about, Dipter said, shaking his head. Max stepped forward, about to lift Dipter off the ground again, until Dipter spoke next. We never touched you outside of school. Those were his orders, Dipter said, voice low. That's a lie. You attacked me just the other day, Max replied sharply. Right, that was the first time. And those were my orders, Dipter admitted with a shrug. It wasn't making sense to Max. He had thought if he found out who was behind the bullying at school, it would lead him to the person who had tried to drown him. The money being ignored. The targeting of those close to him. All of it. Wait, unless, are the two events unrelated? Maybe there's more than one person in this family targeting me. If that's the case, then Dipter might actually be telling the truth, and that just made the situation a whole lot more annoying. Ow, you're hurting me, a voice cried out from behind. When Max turned his head, he was surprised to see that the pit member, Sandra, had another girl restrained by the arms. I caught her sneaking around just behind that wall over there, Sandra said, dragging the girl forward. And she had her phone out as well. Abby, Joe called out, his head tilting in disbelief. Everyone was surprised to see her, including Jay and Dipter, because they all knew she was the one being used against Max. What are you doing here? Max asked, his voice sharp. I'm sorry, Max. I didn't mean to. Abby replied quickly. I went to your house. I wanted to talk to you about what we said the other day. And then I saw you. I just happened to follow you and saw you getting into this whole mess. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. Sandra, still holding Abby's phone, had been scrolling through something. She suddenly stopped, her expression tightening. She turned the phone around and showed the others the screen. Guys, the situation's not looking good. Looks like she called the police about 5 minutes ago, Sandra said, frowning. That meant the police could show up at any second, and with the state everything was in, the chaos, the injuries, the damage, it was going to be incredibly difficult for any of them to walk away from this clean. Ha ha, ha ha ha. Dipter suddenly burst into laughter, sounding like a complete maniac. Huh, looks like I've got the last laugh, after all. His eyes gleamed with twisted satisfaction. When they come, do you really think it's going to be me, us, who get in trouble? No, Max. You've been through this before. It's going to be the same story, just like with Sam. All of us will walk out of this clean. And all of you, you adults who laid your hands on poor, innocent minors, you'll be the ones behind bars. He grinned, teeth bloody, eyes wide with madness. I win in the end. And just then, the sharp, wailing sound of sirens filled the air. They were close. The moment the group heard the sirens, panic washed over their faces like a wave. Stephen lifted both of his hands, clutching the sides of his head. I knew it. I knew I was going to get screwed over the moment he asked me to fight high schoolers, of all things, Stephen said, nearly collapsing to his knees. Why did I have to let that damn money taint me? In frustration, Sandra shoved Abby, causing her to fall hard to the ground and scrape her knee across the rough surface. UB*TCH. Look what kind of situation you've gotten us into. What's wrong with you? I'm sorry. Abby whimpered, covering her face. She was trembling. This wasn't her lifestyle. She had never been in a real fight before. She couldn't even remember the last time she'd gotten into an argument. I'm sorry. When I saw Max going up against all those students and all those weapons in their hands, I didn't know what to do. I panicked. Turning red, Sandra raised her hand again, ready to strike her. Stop, Max shouted. It's okay. She's not involved in all of this. She's just a bystander who did what anyone else might have done. She shouldn't be hurt because of that. Sandra paused, breathing hard, then looked over at Wolf for approval. He gave her a single nod, his expression calm, trying to ease the tension. Max was their client, after all, and it was best to listen to him. Still, Wolf didn't like the way things were starting to look, not one bit. They were usually involved in fights with other gang members, other organized groups. Because of that, neither side ever wanted to get the police involved. And if they were doing a high-level job, they'd typically work with someone who could prevent a situation like this from happening in the first place. This one might be tricky. It's not looking good for us to walk away with absolutely nothing, Wolf thought, his expression unreadable. I should look on the bright side, right? Maybe there's a chance to meet a few S ranks in prison. While the rest of the group stood there, filled with dread, the sound of laughter suddenly broke through the tension. It was still coming from Dipter. Haha, look at all of you. Dipta cackled. Max, you made one huge mistake in all of this. There's more than one way to rule this world besides using your fists, and that's money. Just watch. Watch as all of you get taken away, and I walk out of this completely fine. Between the payments he had received from his client and the money he had stashed away over time, Dipter was confident. More than that, he had built connections through this job. He knew he could get out of this. Haha, you'll be just as useless as you were with what happened to Sam. Dipta yelled, still laughing. Max turned away from him and walked over to where Aaron was standing. Aaron, Max said firmly. Ever alert, Aaron straightened immediately. I want you to make sure that everything that happened today is pinned on Dipter. Today, he's shown no remorse for any of his actions. Yes, sir, Aaron replied. The others were too far away to hear what Max was saying, as he spoke quietly, just for Aaron. On top of that, make sure that everyone who helped us today, nothing happens to them. Not even a slap on the wrist. And include Jay on that list as well. Do all of that, no matter the cost. You understand? I understand, sir, Aaron said, bowing his head deeply to Max. It was an odd sight. The panic on the pit members' faces. The students groaning in pain on the ground. And there, in the middle of it all, an adult bowing to a student. It confused anyone who saw it. Without delay, Aaron turned away and got on the phone. He spoke softly, just low enough that Max couldn't hear a word of it. He made more than one call, and none of them lasted long. The whole situation, it felt oddly familiar. That's when Max noticed it. He pulled out his own phone and saw the notification flash. -500,000. Again, the same amount as last time. Aaron didn't explain anything. He didn't have to. He just wore a small, calm smile across his face. The sound of sirens was loud now, right outside, and moments later, 2 full squads of police officers came charging in, batons drawn. Everyone freeze, one of the officers shouted as they stormed into the area. Get on the ground. Hands where we can see them. Max complied, and so did the others. Even the pit members knew the smartest thing to do right now was follow along with whatever was happening. As they lay flat on the ground, Stephen couldn't stop the tears from pouring down his face. And as Dipter and Max locked eyes across the chaos, Dipter silently mouthed the words. You're screwed. The police didn't bother cuffing the students. There were far too many of them. Instead, the officers stayed close, hovering over everyone, making sure no one moved from where they lay. It didn't take long before they found several large black bags prepared for the day. One by one, they opened them, and soon after, the contents were seized as evidence. Then, one of the officers walked over to Dipter. He looked him up and down for a moment, then reached down, pulled him up off the ground, and helped him stand by offering a shoulder. I told you, Max, look at this. Just look at this, Dipter said, still grinning, until he suddenly felt something tightening around the back of his arms. We've received multiple reports saying you're the ringleader of this entire operation. So, right now, you're under arrest, the officer said flatly. What? Dipta's face dropped completely. All the smugness, all the bravado, gone in an instant. What are you saying, officer? What? Have your ears stopped working? You're in big trouble, kid. This isn't just some small-time school drama. What you've been doing, it's serious. Wait. I think you've made a mistake. Call your chief. He'll know who I am. Tell him it's Dipter. It's Dipter. Dipta shouted, panic rising in his voice. What? So he can tell you you're in even more trouble, the officer replied coldly. Let's not resist. Just get in the car with us. Something wasn't right. Dipta didn't understand. It didn't make sense. Something about all of this felt off. Then he looked at the police officer more closely. His camera, it was turned off. All the officers' cameras had been turned off. Not one of them had read him his rights, or even stated the official charges. How did they know to go straight for him? To call him the ringleader based on description alone? As Dipter was being moved away from the crowd, he noticed the same officer walk over and pick Aaron up from the ground. After a brief conversation between them, the officers began letting the pit members, Joe and Steven, off the ground. Each one was allowed to stand, dust themselves off, and leave without being stopped. Even Jay. As Dipter passed by, his path crossed with Max's, and Max wore a wide smile. "You're right," Max said calmly. "It's hard to get used to what money can really do, huh? Even I'm more used to solving things with my fists." As Dipter continued to be led away, his mind began spinning, connecting dots he hadn't noticed before. His client, Chad Stern. Everything Chad had said. The information Dipter himself had learned about him. And now, it was all starting to make sense. "Now, it all makes sense," Dipter muttered. "I know why he told us to go after you. Not just that, I know exactly why he wanted you. It all makes sense now." Dipter continued to be pulled away as the car door swung open, but he resisted getting inside, digging in his heels as he shouted at the top of his lungs. "I know who you are. You're. The police car door slammed shut, and now the group could only hear muffled cries coming from Dipter inside, having no clue what he had been about to say. It was a question that lingered in many of their minds, but they wouldn't be getting the answer today. "What are you guys still hanging around for?" one of the policemen barked. "I already said, the rest of you can leave." He was talking about Aaron and everyone else who had been cleared to go. And without wasting any time, before the police could change their minds, they were quick to take the opportunity. As they stepped past the site's barriers and started heading down the street, the pit members were left scratching their heads, clearly confused. "They just let us go just like that. That's never happened before, right? They didn't even ask us for statements or take our names. What just happened? I'm so confused." The joy of not getting into trouble had clearly overwhelmed the pit members, and because of that, they hadn't been paying close enough attention to fully grasp what was really going on. "Abby," Max said, turning toward her, his voice calm. "I think it's best you head home for the rest of the day. It's been tiring, and there's a lot I need to think about." He offered a faint smile. "We'll see each other at school, right? And don't worry too much. I've got a feeling things are going to be a lot better at school from now on." Abby wiped away her tears. She still felt guilty for calling the police when she did, and the swirl of emotions clouding her thoughts made it hard to think clearly. Still, she believed it had been the best thing to do, at least for now. As the group started walking, they made their way toward the train station. After all, Wolf and the rest of the pit members were heading back to Notting Hill City. Their job was done, and their contract fulfilled. Along the way, a particular figure stepped closer to Max, one of the larger walls of muscle in the group. "Max, it was you, right?" Jay asked. "It's because of you that I'm walking free, that I'm not still back there with the police like the rest. I told you I'd pay you back for the favor you did for me that day," Max replied. "I don't lie. I don't go back on my word. Still, that was a small favor in my eyes compared to what you did for me. So again, if you're ever in trouble, let me know." Jay quickly bowed his head. "Thank you," he said, and as he lifted his head, he took off running fast without looking back. Where he was going, what Jay would do next, it was hard to say. But he had morals, unlike many of the others. It was difficult to understand how someone like him had ended up working under Dipter. But for now, it wasn't Max's business. "Hey," Steven said, walking beside him. "Looks like we actually managed to get out of there, and I've got a feeling it's all because of Max." "I don't think you're wrong," Joe replied. "That guy, knowing gangs, having a bodyguard with him the entire time? How the heck did anyone even get away with bullying him for so long? I have no clue what's really going on. But I do know one thing. I lucked out when I decided to join Max's side. If things had gone any differently, I'd probably be back there with the rest right now." Finally, the group arrived at the train station. It was time for them to part ways. "Thank you for today," Max said, turning to Wolf. "You all did a good job. You deserve the money. I already sent it over, so I think you should treat your guys, celebrate a little." "Oh, are you telling me how to run my gang now, too?" Wolf raised an eyebrow, half amused. "You're an interesting person, Max. A very interesting person. If you need our help again, I won't ignore a call from you." Wolf turned, the rest of the pit members following behind him. "Who knows? Maybe next time, I'll be the one giving you a call." After the others boarded the train, Max then turned to Steven and Joe as well. The two of you did good as well. It's because of everyone that I was able to get where I needed to, Max said with a small nod. Although, I think I saw, Joe, you only took out 3 guys, and Steven, you took out 6 in total. Hey, wait a minute, Steven said. That's because I was dealing with that tank of student. You should at least be worth 10 students. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. Yeah? And I took out Co. Joe added proudly. That's got to count for something, right? You remember how badly he bullied you? He deserved everything that happened to him. You mean we, Steven corrected. If I remember right, you told me you were one of the people picking on him too. Honestly, I think you should donate your payment to me for training you properly. Max just laughed, shaking his head, and started walking ahead while the two of them continued bickering behind him. A few hours later, the pit members were back at the abandoned automobile shop where they usually hung out. They had ordered a mountain of takeout food and drinks to celebrate, just like Max had instructed. However, something weighed heavily on Wolf's mind. Even as they relaxed, joked, and ate, the events of the day replayed in his head. Something about it all just didn't sit right with him. As the group continued drinking and unwinding, the sound of footsteps echoed across the shop floor. Instantly, the pit members turned, alert, eyes narrowing toward the man who had just entered. It's all right, Wolf shouted, raising a hand. I was the one who invited him. The man walked in with a white jacket draped over his shoulders and glanced around at the pit members as he passed them. A few of them noticed the symbol stitched onto the back of his jacket, a white tiger. Everyone seems in high spirits. You celebrating something? The man asked casually. Lee, it's been a while since we last saw each other, right? Wolf replied. I called you because you owe me a favor from that last outing we had. Lee gave a nervous smile as he rubbed the back of his neck. I figured you'd cash that and eventually might as well get it over with. What is it you want? You guys have a big network and a lot of pull. After all, your crew's one of the biggest groups in the city. So, if I asked you to get information on someone, you could do that, right? Wolf asked, his voice calm but serious. Haha, are you serious? Lee replied with a grin. That's your big favor? As a member of the White Tiger, I can get you information on anyone you want. All right then, I need you to look into this kid for me. I want everything you can find out about him. The pit's hangout also served as the place where they slept. For most of the members, including Wolf himself, it was their home. They didn't have anywhere else to go, and the only way they knew how to make money, the only place that would accept them, was here, inside the shop. Wolf had a makeshift office where he spent most of his time working, either adjusting his motorbike or rebuilding car parts. They were ongoing projects, like most things in his life, with no real timeline to finish them. After having a surprisingly good night's sleep, Wolf woke up earlier than usual. The other members were still fast asleep, scattered throughout the shop in different sections, mostly upstairs, while Wolf was already busy with another one of his projects, leveling up his character in his favorite RPG game. I still can't figure it out. That wasn't just some regular high school brawl, Wolf said aloud. It felt like there was something more serious behind it. And I'll admit, I was wrong about one thing. Max might be an E-class fighter, but his experience, it feels like S-class. Just who is that kid? Why are you wasting so much time thinking about high schooler? Sandra asked, standing behind him, her own phone in hand. Thanks to Wolf, she had become quite addicted to the RPG game too, and right now, the two of them were in the middle of running a dungeon together, fighting side by side. Do you really think a kid could do that? Not even the best street gangs could pull off what he did, Wolf said, not even glancing back as he continued tapping away on his phone. Do what, beat up that student? Sandra asked. No, control the police, Wolf replied. If a street gang had that kind of power, I wouldn't even call them a street gang anymore. To have influence over the police in a particular city? Didn't you notice what happened? Dipta thought those officers were in his back pocket. He was sure of it. And then someone else showed up with even more pull. I'm excited to see what the White Tiger digs up. Right on cue, Wolf spotted Lee walking quickly through the maze of abandoned cars, heading straight toward them. Each of his steps was heavy, urgent. Something was clearly wrong. Lee burst through the door, startling both of them. What is wrong with you? Lee snapped. Hey, calm down, Sandra said, lowering her phone. We know you're part of the White Tiger, But remember, you're the one who owes Wolf a favor. Yeah, well, there are limits to the kind of favors you can ask for, Lee shot back. What do you mean? Wolf asked, his tone sharpening. Is this about what I asked you last night? Of course it is. Lee shouted. I did what you asked. I started looking into the kid from that school. Went through our connections. Everything seemed normal, but then things started to get weird. I was getting berated by my own group. Lee said, his voice rising. They started asking me why I was digging into that matter, interrogating me, and I've been a member for 3 years. I had to lie and say one of our clients just wanted some basic info. You're lucky I didn't rat you out, but they told me to drop it. Said to tell the client, it's something we can't do. And if I ever got a request like that again, I was supposed to pretend I was never even asked. Wolf, I seriously felt like I was going to get killed. Sanders' mouth hung open in disbelief. A white tiger member, afraid for his life? Just because of a simple request to look into someone? Huh. Wolf let out a loud laugh, leaning his head back with amusement. What an interesting man. If that's the reaction from the mighty white tiger, then don't you think there's a real chance? A chance that this kid, Max, might be connected to someone even bigger than them. When Max woke up in his small apartment, the first thing that greeted him was the dull, familiar ceiling and the room itself, which served as a reminder that this new life of his was now a reality. He didn't know why, but some part of him had believed that maybe, just maybe, once he dealt with Dipter, once things at school settled down, whatever had placed him in his body would finally let him go. But he was still in it. He was still Max Stern, and Max Stern still had enemies. As Max got up from his bed, he began pacing around the room, something he usually did when he was deep in thought. With Dipta no longer in school, I won't have any more trouble there. They can't use Abby against me anymore, and I'll finally be able to move freely. But the real question is, can I use the money freely? He paused, staring at the floor. I found out the one pulling Dipter's strings was Chad, but I still don't know why he was trying to suppress me. Was it just because he thought I was an easy target? That would be simple to pay off a bunch of high schoolers. Max let out a slow breath. And if I had to guess, I think they were telling the truth. They weren't behind the original incident, the one that put Max in this condition in the first place. If Max couldn't use the money freely, then he couldn't use it to gather more information, especially not about the White Tiger Gang. And what he didn't want was to bring even more targets onto his back. It would be best if he could get rid of anyone who was still troubling him. In the middle of his thoughts, a knock suddenly echoed from the door. All right, it's still Sunday. So I guess that stalker here for his usual routine, Max muttered as he walked to the door. When he opened it wide, he wasn't surprised. Aaron was standing right there. Sir, are you not dressed? Aaron asked, raising an eyebrow. Do I have to be dressed in my own apartment? Isn't that one of the freedoms of having your own place? Max replied, stepping aside from the door. Master, did you not get the message I sent you this morning? Aaron asked as he walked in. Max had been too busy thinking about his next move to bother checking. He had taken care of one small pebble in the bigger problem. Sure, he would have liked to deal with Chad, but how could he do that without upsetting the rest of the Stern family? And what would Chad's reaction be once he realized Dipta was gone? Well, you're here now, so you can just tell me, Max said, walking over to his closet and pulling out a hoodie. Sir, you'll need to be dressed in something more formal than that, Aaron said. There's an event you're required to attend today. It's a fundraiser being hosted by the Kurtz family. The Kurtz family. Only one name rang in Max's mind, Sherry Kurtz, his ex-fiancée. And sir, Aaron added, adjusting his cuffs slightly, some of your family members will be attending the event as well. It had been a while since Max had seen his new family members, and the last time they met, he hadn't exactly walked away with a good impression of any of them. But the one who stood out the most, without a doubt, was Chad Stern. And that was before Max knew Chad had been the one to sick the entire school on him. Now, they were going to meet again at an event hosted by the family of his ex-fiancée. Last time, Max had barely managed to keep it together. And now that he knew the truth, he worried it might end in a complete massacre. At that moment, Max's hand hovered over the only suit hanging in his closet. He paused, staring at it in silence. I don't really want to wear this, Max thought. The last time I wore this was at his funeral, and it's all I have left to remind me. It had just tarnished the memory. "We can get a new one," Aaron said gently, having waited silently in Max's room the entire time. "The event is in the evening, so we still have some time to shop. And remember, I'll be by your side." Aaron was dependable, to say the least. But in many ways, he was also a weakness. Someone Max didn't want to see get hurt. "I guess it's jogging bottoms and a hoodie for now," Max muttered as he started to get changed. "I do want to warn you," Aaron began, adjusting his cuffs. "This is a fundraising event, and because of that, there will be high-profile guests in attendance, not just members of the Stern family." "Paparazzi, too?" Max asked as he pulled on his loosely fitted trousers. "So even more reason not to cause a scene. Is that what you're saying?" In the middle of it all, Aaron was quietly shaking his head. Max looked extremely casual. Not that it would matter in the normal world, but in the world he was about to step into, it absolutely would. "It'll be a double-edged sword for them," Aaron said. "The presence of the press means your family members won't be able to pull anything, at least not like last time. Which is why I'm warning you, Max. They could try to provoke you. If you slip up and cause a bad scene, it'll reflect poorly on the Stern family. And that will lead your grandfather to be greatly disappointed in you." Finally, Max was ready to leave. As much as he wished he could walk into the charity event dressed like this, he knew it wasn't an option. Even in the underworld, people had enough sense to respect someone who made the effort to appear presentable. Why are they even holding this charity event in the first place? Max asked. "Didn't you tell me the Kurtz family was barely hanging on by a thread?" "That's precisely the reason why," Aaron explained. "These charity events usually include items up for auction. The wealthy overbid on base-priced items donated by sponsors, and the excess money is used to fundraise for charity." He folded his hands behind his back. "It's a good way for the rich to present themselves as doing some goodwill, get positive press, good public reports. And dodge some taxes?" Max interrupted. Aaron cleared his throat awkwardly. "Yes, there is an element of that, of course. But for the Kurtz family, this is also a rare opportunity. They get to present themselves in front of many wealthy individuals, people who might just be their way out of the situation they're in. A small gesture for some can be a lifeline for others. Even you understand that." Some memories surfaced in Max's mind. The last time he saw Sherry, she had been trying to suck up to Chad, hoping to strengthen business ties between the families. But Max also remembered that it was because of her that he had uncovered one of the biggest holes in his memories. It was hard to say she was a bad person. With both of them ready, they exited the apartment and headed down toward the front of the street. "Oh, and I do have one suggestion," Aaron added as they walked. "While you're shopping for a suit, I think it would be wise for you to present a gift. It's customary and quite respectful to give something to the host at these kinds of events. A gift. I guess she does deserve one for helping me." Max mumbled to himself. "That's a good idea. Besides, I need to test it out anyway, see if I can actually use this money and whether it draws any attention or not. Finally, I can put this money to good use. Who knows, maybe I'll even pick up something nice for myself at the auction." As Max stepped out onto the street, his hands dropped to his sides as he stared straight ahead. "What is that?" Max asked, blinking. "I told you already, we're at a fundraising event. A member of the Stern family can't be seen arriving in something ordinary," Aaron said as he casually stepped forward and opened the door to the car parked in front of them, a sleek, red Ferrari supercar. Max didn't say much. He simply walked over and climbed into the passenger seat, where he caught sight of Aaron putting on a pair of sunglasses, clearly pleased. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Max muttered. "It's very rare I get to drive something like this," Aaron replied. "Most of the cars we use are built for comfort. But you know, if you do start using that money of yours, I wouldn't mind a gift or two like this myself." Aaron pressed down on the pedal, the engine roaring to life as the car revved, then launched forward down the street. "I hope no one sees me in this," Max thought. "It'll blow my cover. But I guess I should enjoy the money a little." The fundraising event was set at a grand manor tucked deep in the countryside. The Kurtz family had rented the estate for the day. A professional team was already hard at work organizing the decorations and arranging the items that would be displayed throughout the massive main ballroom. Meanwhile, Sherry was getting her makeup done by a team of professionals, her mother standing nearby, watching her every move. "This is it," This is it. You have to look spectacular today, her mother, Sana, urged. She was dressed in a deep purple gown, her body practically shimmering from head to toe in jewelry. Pearls hung around her neck, draped elegantly alongside a glowing gemstone, while heavy bracelets lined her arms, weighing them down. Sana was someone who cared more about image than anything else, and she made sure her daughter followed that same standard. Remember what I told you. You need to keep sticking close to Chad Stern, no matter what, Sana pressed. You've been doing well the last few times, winning him over, but this time, you need to make him fall head over heels for you. But Mom, isn't Max going to be there too? Sherry asked, her voice low. If I do that, won't it leave a bad impression on me? People know Max and I were supposed to get married. Do you think that matters? Sana scoffed. You need to forget about Max, forget you were even with him. With your looks, you should be able to get anyone to do whatever you want. You're my daughter, so I know you can do it. She leaned in closer. Win Chad's heart. You have to. It might be the only way to save our family. The revving sound of the engine echoed through the streets, instantly drawing attention. Heads turned, conversations paused, and all eyes followed the sleek red car as it raced by. There were mixed reactions. Some pointed at the vehicle in awe. Others rolled their eyes or scoffed. Whether positive or negative, one thing was certain, it was impossible to ignore. Did you see that just now? Joe asked, standing just outside the gym, waiting for Stephen to lift the gate. Yeah, damn rich people, Stephen grumbled. Always looking to show off. Is there really a need to drive something so flashy and rub it in everyone's face? You're not wrong, Joe replied, but I still wish I was one of them someday. Better than ending up broke like you. I'd rather be broke than a bully, Stephen muttered as he stepped inside the gym. Manchester City was a coastal city located right by the sea. Strangely enough, there were no beaches, but instead, it had several well-developed port areas. The city itself was shaped like a crescent, which made it possible to live in multiple neighborhoods and still have a view of the ocean from nearly anywhere. Because of this, each district had its own local high street and shopping area. However, the luxury shopping malls, the ones that catered to the rich, were located in a particular area known as Shindon, right along the seafront. And while Manchester City had no beaches, oddly enough, it still drew in large numbers of tourists every year thanks to its scenery, atmosphere, and high-end attractions. So the shopping mall didn't just house luxury brands, it also had popular retail stores, making it appealing to a wide range of clientele, which meant that even when Aaron and Max pulled into the underground car park, they were still turning heads. People had seen their fair share of BBWs, Mercedes-Benzes, and Porsches, but a car like this? That was rare. Hey, you think it's some kind of celebrity? One of the younger guys whispered. Nah, another replied. Celebs don't come to places like this. They usually go to those private boutiques, you know? Fortunately, the car park wasn't too crowded as Max and Aaron stepped out of the vehicle. I think it's best you stay here and look after the car, Max said. Are you sure about that, sir? Aaron asked, brows furrowing. What if someone's following you? Or worse, you get attacked again? That's exactly why I want you to stay here, Max replied firmly. We've noticed one thing. They never come after me when you're around. So I want to start creating situations where we're apart. Small ones like this. Let them get confident. Let them think I'm vulnerable. Then we catch them when they move. Aaron hesitated as Max continued. Besides, this is one of the safer places to pull something like this. It's a shopping mall, full of people and security. And come on, Aaron, I do know how to shop. You don't have to follow me into every store. Although Aaron still wasn't fully convinced, he decided it was best to let Max go and enjoy a little weekend freedom. After all, he was still a student. If you're not back by 1 p.m., after lunch I'll come find you. That'd give you a couple of hours to find something, Aaron said, checking the time. With both of them in agreement, Max went off on his own. Although it was still early in the morning, the shopping mall was already buzzing with people. Without wasting time, Max headed into the first suit shop he saw and immediately picked out a plain black suit. He grabbed one off the rack and started browsing shirts. That's when one particular shirt caught his eye, a bold red one. Damn it, after my so-called lucky red underwear led to my death, I've been avoiding red altogether, Max thought. but it is more my style. Reluctantly, he gave in and added the shirt to his purchase. After trying on the suit, the shop staff quickly measured him up and noticed the pant legs were too long. Thankfully, the store had an in-house alteration service. "We'll be done in about an hour," the woman assisting him said with a fresh smile. "If you come back after that, your suit will be ready for pickup." With that, Max left the shop feeling pretty pleased with himself. In and out, quick work. And the best part? He hadn't even spent much on the suit. There's no point buying an expensive suit. They always end up ripped or covered in blood anyway, Max thought. But now, I need to find a gift for Sherry. I was always bad at these kinds of things. I don't even know what women like. I never had time to settle down in the past. Looking around, Max found himself on one of the higher floors. On this particular level, there were countless jewelry shops lined up, each selling a wide variety of items. Every shop had suited men standing at either side of the entrance, and inside were uniformed attendants busy talking to and serving customers. If I get something expensive, then at least they can sell it if they don't like it, Max reasoned. It's not like she's my fiancée. She's an ex anyway. He stepped inside one of the shops. The moment he walked through the door, one of the security guards gave him a long look, scanning him from head to toe. Dressed in joggers and a hoodie, Max stood out just as much as the red car had on the road, only not in the same welcoming way. Behind the glass counters, a few attendants took notice. Two female staff members in particular exchanged a glance. "Come on," Louise whispered, frustrated. "I really need to hit my sales target. Why do we keep getting time wasters coming in here?" "They just browse and leave," replied Claire, her partner, with a sigh. "And that one? It looks like a high schooler." Looking around, there were plenty of pieces that caught Max's eye. Rings, brooches, necklaces. However, there was one problem. There weren't any price tags. Unlike with the suits, he couldn't just pick something up and bring it to the counter. "Excuse me," Max called out. One of the female attendants turned briefly in his direction, then suddenly pivoted and rushed over to another customer. "Can I help you with anything today, ma'am?" she said, all smiles. Max blinked, confused by the abrupt shift. Maybe she didn't hear me? Hello." He tried again, but this time, another attendant who had been nearby turned and walked straight into the back room. "What the heck?" Max muttered under his breath. Once could have been a coincidence. Twice. Not a chance. Frustrated, Max couldn't hold it in anymore. "Will anyone F***king help me?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the shop. The sudden outburst drew the attention of the security guards and several of the staff. Reluctantly, Louise sighed and walked over. "Sir, please don't shout in this establishment. You're disrupting the experience for our other customers. If any of you had actually paid attention to me in the first place, nothing would be disrupted. Aren't I a customer too?" Max snapped. Louise looked him up and down again, barely able to take him seriously in his hoodie and joggers. "There's no need to be rude, sir," she said curtly. "Can I look at that?" Max pointed toward a red ruby bracelet behind the glass. "Sir, may I ask, do you actually intend to buy? Items can be viewed from behind the glass, and we only take them out if the customer intends to make a purchase," Louise explained. Just then, Max glanced to his side and noticed an older woman asking to see an item. Without hesitation, the attendant took it out and handed it to her, no questions asked. The situation made Max's blood boil. "Do you just not want to do your job?" he asked, voice sharp. "Excuse me," Louise replied, clearly annoyed. Max tapped his finger on the glass and pointed toward the other attendants. With a reluctant sigh, Louise finally took out the ruby bracelet and placed it in front of him. But by now, the frustration had completely soured the moment. Max simply handed it back. "Of course, typical time waster," Louise muttered under her breath. Max continued walking through the shop, glancing at a few other displays, but his mood was clearly ruined. Still, there were plenty of other jewelry stores in the mall. If he didn't find something here, he could always move on. That's when Louise suddenly returned. Only this time, she got uncomfortably close. So close that the hairs on the back of Max's neck stood on end. "Did you find anything you liked, sir?" Louise asked sweetly. Her tone completely changed, her smile oddly forced. "What is this?" She's acting completely different now. Did her manager say something? Max thought. Forget it. This place has ruined my mood. I'm getting out of here, Max muttered, heading toward the exit. But just as he reached the door, an alarm blared through the store. Beep, beep, beep. Immediately, the two security guards stepped in front of him, blocking his path. What's going on? Max thought, confused. Sir, we need to do a quick check, one of the guards said, stepping closer. The moment the alarm went off inside the shop, every customer turned their head in Max's direction. Even people outside in the mall paused, their attention caught by the sound. Some pressed up against the glass windows, while others slowed their pace to gawk. Heads shook visibly, and whispers quickly spread among strangers, trading thoughts like gossip at a dinner table. Even from inside the store, judgment came swift. It's always the ones you suspect, one older woman muttered under her breath. They should have just turned him away at the door. You want to search me? Max asked, glaring at the two security guards in front of him. Pretty sure it's your machine that's broken. Without waiting for a reply, Max turned and stepped through the exit again. Beep, beep, beep. The alarm blared once more. The guards immediately shifted, stepping in front of him with synchronized precision, blocking the exit entirely. Fine, search me then, Max said, jaw tight. He was already irritated. Now the entire shop was making it worse. He moved back inside, standing still as one of the guards began to frisk him. They patted him down quickly, but found nothing. Then came the order to empty his pockets. Max complied, wallet, phone, keys, laid out on a nearby counter. Still nothing suspicious. The search grew more thorough. The second guard stepped in, checking the seams of his clothes and lining of his hoodie. And then, just as Max shifted slightly, one of them reached into the hood of his hoodie and pulled something out. A small ring. Silver, clean, and with a red jewel glinting under the store lights. Well, will you look at that? One of the guards said, holding the sparkling item up for nearly everyone in the store to see. Guess the machine wasn't broken after all. What the? That was in my hood. How did that even get there? Max asked, staring at the ring in disbelief. Yes, I suppose it just magically got there, the guard replied, shaking his head with a sarcastic grin. Can you calm down with the accusations for a second? Max shot back. All of your jewelry is locked behind glass cabinets. I couldn't take anything even if I wanted to. The only people with keys are your employees. You seem pretty observant for someone who didn't steal anything, the guard said, stepping closer. Come on, you're coming to the back while we call the authorities. With their bulky frames closing in, Max found himself being practically herded toward the back room. Don't you guys have cameras or something? Where's the proof I took anything? Max asked, sighing as he still chose to follow along. As he walked, he spotted Louise standing off to the side, arms folded across her chest and a smug smile stretching across her face. If you can't afford the items, maybe don't try to steal them, she said, voice loud enough for others to hear. Why don't you get a real job like the rest of us? In that moment, a memory flashed in Max's mind. Louise getting uncomfortably close to him from behind earlier. It had felt weird at the time, but now? It couldn't be, could it? Max thought, a chill creeping up his spine. I can't believe your parents raised you to be like this. They must be ashamed to have a kid like you, Louise said, arms still crossed. B*TCH. Max snapped. Talking about my parents is not something you want to do. His eyes locked onto hers, sharp and wild like a beast ready to pounce. Even Louise flinched, gulping as she saw the rage burning in his glare while he was escorted into the back room. She didn't say another word. Claire quickly rushed over to her friend's side. What was that about? His eyes. He looked like he was going to murder you, Claire said, wide-eyed. Those types? All bark, no bite, Louise replied, brushing it off. He'll be dealt with anyway. Come on, I think it's time for a lunch break. Actually, after that mess, I think we deserve to take it a little early. Claire nodded, and the two of them quickly grabbed their things, heading toward the exit of the shop. Don't worry, though, Louise, Claire added. If that guy did try anything, Tom would have handled it. He is part of the security team for a reason. Meanwhile, Max had been led to the back of the store, into what looked like the manager's office. The first thing he noticed was the wall of security monitors blinking above a desk. Well, at least those cameras will prove my innocence, Max thought. Take a seat, Right here, one of the men said. His name badge read Tom across the front. Max sat down without argument. Then, right in front of him, Tom pulled out his phone and began to dial. Wait, what are you doing? Max asked, eyeing the phone in Tom's hand. What do you think I'm doing? I'm calling the police to make a report, Tom replied coldly. This isn't some kid's candy store. What you did was a serious crime. So I'll let them handle the situation. You can't be serious, Max replied, disbelief all over his face. This whole thing is ridiculous. I'll just pay for the damn ring. I had no reason to steal it in the first place. The man standing to Tom's right snickered. Oh, really? You think you could just pay for it now? If you could afford it, you wouldn't have tried to steal it in the first place. You're not the first kid to try this stunt, you know. Max clenched his fists in his lap, trying hard to breathe. He could feel the anger bubbling, but he remembered Aaron's words. Today would be full of people trying to push him, trying to make him snap. This, he realized, was a perfect test. He needed to not solve this with his fists. You've got cameras all over that shop, Max said, trying to keep his voice level. Check the footage. I guarantee you'll see I didn't take anything. In fact, I bet you'll see one of your own workers setting me up. Tom turned slowly, eyes narrowing as he glanced at the wall of monitors. They were currently streaming live footage from the shop. He looked down at the ring in his hand, then turned back to the screens and focused in on the cabinet it had come from. Tom continued dialing, raising the phone to his ear. What are you doing? Max said, stepping forward. Look at the camera. Tom didn't even flinch. He just stood there, waiting for the call to connect. I said, look at the camera. The ringing on the line clearly picked up on the other end, and that was the last straw for Max. He shot up from his seat, grabbed Tom by the tie, yanked him forward, and slammed a heavy punch straight into his face. Before the second guard could even react, Max spun and kicked him hard, right between the legs. The man dropped with a gasp, and Max followed it up with a brutal uppercut to his jaw. With both men stunned, Max grabbed Tom again, this time by the back of the head. I told you to look at the damn camera. Max shouted. He drove Tom's head straight into the display screen, the monitor cracking apart on impact. Glass and plastic shattered, sparks flickering for a moment. Max stood over the two men on the floor, fists trembling. Damn it, he muttered through clenched teeth. Meanwhile, back in the parking garage, Aaron waited patiently near the car. Max still had a little time before the deadline they'd agreed on, but Aaron couldn't help the growing worry in his chest. Am I overthinking this? It's like he said, just a quick shopping trip. Nothing should go wrong, right? Aaron thought. Just then, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He saw the name flash on screen and answered it without hesitation. Aaron, Max's voice came through, a little out of breath. I got a situation. I could use your help. Cleaning it up. Listening intently to the phone, Aaron nodded along, absorbing every word Max said. His facial expressions shifted second by second, eyebrows raising, jaw tightening, until Max finally finished explaining what had happened. Aaron let out a long breath through his nose, forcing himself to stay calm. I see. It's a good thing you're okay now, Aaron said. So you just left the shop and decided to get your suit? Max didn't answer right away, but Aaron continued anyway. I can understand your situation. There's just a slight issue, he added. You see the shopping mall? It's actually owned by one of your family members. One of the Stearns. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Silence that told Aaron Max had stopped in his tracks. Then came the question he'd been expecting, the one Max was probably dreading. Which one? Max asked. It's Karen Stern, Aaron replied. Of all people, for this mess to unfold in her property? Chad's mother? Max couldn't help but think how typical it was. Of course, a place that hired renegades with attitude problems would belong to someone like her. It won't be a problem, Aaron added calmly. I can sweep this under the rug easily. I just wanted to inform you, so you be more careful. I doubt anyone here in the mall knows who you really are, but don't worry. By the time you get back, everything will be handled. With that, Aaron ended the call and immediately began dialing a few numbers. This time, it wouldn't cost Max a cent. As the head of one of the Air's security divisions, there were still things Aaron could handle using his name alone. This was definitely one of them. While Aaron waited in the car park, two female attendants came strolling in, scanning for their vehicle. It was their lunch break, and they were heading out to a nearby restaurant, already tired of the same mall food they had every day. The two walked side by side, arms linked casually, chatting between themselves, until something caught their eye. "Look over there," Louise said, tugging Claire's arm. Claire turned and spotted it too, the flashy red car. But it wasn't just the car that drew their attention. It was the man standing next to it. "Wow, a handsome man and a killer car," Claire replied, her eyes glinting. "If someone like him walked into the shop, I bet he'd have zero problem buying his girl a whole basket of gifts." She smirked. "You're right about that," Louise agreed, eyes locked on Aaron. "I think I'm going to go talk to him." "What? Don't you already have Tom?" Claire asked, blinking in surprise. "And do you really think Tom will ever drive a car like that?" Louise shot back. "Someone like me deserves a 10 out of 10 and an upgrade." Claire couldn't get a word in before Louise slipped away, making a beeline straight for the car and the man beside it. "Hi there," Louise said sweetly, brushing her hair back as she stepped up to him. She fluttered her lashes. "I noticed you were just standing around. Do you need any help? I actually work inside the mall, and, well, I've got a little free time. I'd be more than happy to show you around, if you'd like." "Sorry, madam, but I don't have time," Aaron replied politely, his tone cool and composed. "I'm waiting for someone." "Oh, you are? Is it your partner, perhaps?" Louise asked, forcing a playful tone, hoping for a no. "Not my partner. I'm waiting for my boss," Aaron answered simply. "Boss?" Louise looked him over again. Yes, he was handsome, but now she noticed something else. The way he stood perfectly straight beside the car. It almost looked like he was a driver or something. "So this car doesn't belong to you?" she asked, voice faltering just a bit. "It does not," Aaron answered without hesitation, his eyes scanning the area just beyond her shoulder. "And, this boss of yours, where exactly is he right now?" Aaron's eyes suddenly lit up with recognition. He gave a small nod as he spotted the person in question. Louise and Claire turned to look and froze. It was him, the same student who had been in the shop just moments ago. The same one they'd accused and embarrassed. And now, he was walking straight toward them, his expression like thunder, his hands cut and bruised, his knuckles bloodied. A rush of thoughts flooded Louise's head. Did he follow me? What happened? How did he get out of the shop? Is he here to attack me? Panicked, she did the only thing she could think of. She ducked behind Aaron, clutching his arm like a shield. "Please," she said, voice trembling. "Help me. I think that man is chasing me, and he's going to hurt me." "That man," Aaron repeated, raising an eyebrow. "He won't harm you. I know that for sure. That man is my boss." Louise blinked. She wasn't sure if she'd heard him properly. Boss. That high school student, dressed in worn joggers and a hoodie, was his boss? And he owned that car? That had to be impossible. "What are you doing?" Max asked, voice sharp as he approached. "What do you mean, sir?" "This woman just approached me while I was waiting here for you the entire time," Aaron replied casually. "That woman, she's the one who framed me and started this whole mess." Max snapped, pointing at Louise. "She's the one I was just telling you about." Aaron's head slowly tilted down. His expression darkened. When Louise looked up and locked eyes with him, a chill ran down her spine. His stare was even more intense than Max's, veins visibly bulging near his temples, rage simmering just beneath the surface. "Get off me, you filthy animal," Aaron growled. Stunned, Louise immediately let go of his sleeve and stumbled backward, landing hard on the concrete floor. Max stood there, staring at her. There was anger in his eyes, a lot of it, but deep down, he knew nothing good would come from making things worse. "Let's just go before something happens," Max muttered, climbing into the passenger seat. Still biting his bottom lip, Aaron slid into the driver's side, his stare lingering on Louise. He didn't break eye contact, not once. As the engine roared to life and they began to pull away, Max rolled down the window, lifting his middle finger toward the woman without a word as they exited the parking garage and disappeared into the distance. "Wait, it's true. That kid, the two of them were really together? What just happened?" Louise thought, her hand trembling slightly as Claire rushed over to her side. "Can you believe it?" Claire said, wide-eyed. "That car, I think it actually belonged to that kid. Maybe he really was in a shop to buy something. But if he had money like that, Why would he steal? Although Claire was rambling, asking question after question, Louise wasn't answering. She just stared ahead, frozen. What she'd seen in Aaron's eyes back there was real, raw, and terrifying. She hadn't just been embarrassed. She felt something she never expected to feel that day. Fear. Meanwhile, as they sped off, Max had tossed his new suit in the cramped back seat, still mumbling under his breath. A part of him felt like what happened wasn't enough. That woman deserved more, but he couldn't let her ruin the rest of his day. He had bigger things to worry about. "We need to start heading to the fundraising event, sir," Aaron said, eyes on the road. "Right," Max sighed. "And now we're heading there. And I still don't have a gift." "Great. Hopefully, that won't be a problem. Because honestly, I'm not in the mood to be messed with." It wasn't just Max either. Aaron wasn't in the mood for games himself. He'd seen what that woman had tried to pull, and now he was hoping the Stern family wouldn't try anything foolish. Because today, neither of them were in the mood to play nice. Both Aaron and Max needed to cool their heads, and there was no better way to do that than by cruising along the coast, letting the ocean wind hit their faces. It was something Max had enjoyed in his previous life, though back then he only had a motorbike. But time was ticking. Eventually, they pulled over near a boutique so Max could get changed. Aaron bought a few small items so the staff wouldn't complain about them using the fitting room. When Max stepped out of the changing room, Aaron looked up and almost didn't recognize him. Wearing a sharp black suit, his hair slightly gelled back, and that bold red shirt underneath, Max looked like an entirely new man. "I have to say, that rather cheap suit fits you surprisingly well," Aaron said with a smirk. "You can tell it's cheap, huh?" Max replied, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. "They all feel a little different, but as long as it fits, that's what matters." "You look like a different person. If you'd walked into the jewelry store dressed like this, I bet you wouldn't have had any trouble getting service," Aaron replied. "People who judge others by what they wear are not the kind of people I want anything to do with," Max said as he walked past, heading toward the exit. "One more thing," Aaron called out. "You look good in red. You should wear it more often. It's a luck." "Don't say it," Max interrupted, holding out a hand as he headed toward the car. "Just don't say it." The night sky had rolled in, signaling it was finally time for the fundraising event. Max and Aaron had driven a fair distance out of the city, far beyond the coastline and deep into the countryside. The roads were still smooth and well-paved, but on either side stretched vast, empty fields that went on for miles. Because of how dark it was, they couldn't make out much in the fields, but up ahead, one location stood out like a beacon. A massive manor sat perched elegantly atop a small hill, glowing with sparkling lights. Even from a distance, they could hear the distant buzz of music and chatter. Bright stage lights swept across the manor's front, and decorative drapes hung over the building's elegant architecture. Flashing cameras fired off in bursts near the entrance. "There's hundreds of people here," Max said, eyes wide as they neared. "This is nothing like the last party we went to." "You're right," Aaron replied calmly. "And I did inform you about all this ahead of time." As they pulled up to the grand gated entrance, several doormen and guards stood waiting. There was a strict entry protocol. Guests had to be on the guest list, provide proper ID for cross-referencing, and display a unique code to gain access. Even outside the gates, paparazzi swarmed, desperate to catch a glimpse of someone important. Cameras clicked non-stop, although they didn't pay much attention to Max. They continued up the winding drive, eventually pulling into the open space in front of the manor. The paved lot looked large enough to hold at least 200 cars, with even more vehicles parked across the garden space scattered around the massive estate. As they continued up the drive, there was a designated stop point near the manor entrance where cars pulled in, paused for a few moments, and let their passengers out. People would step out, pose for photos under the lights, and then casually make their way toward the entrance of the grand estate. "I have to admit, this is way bigger than those poker nights I used to host with the boys," Max thought, eyeing the flashing lights and buzzing crowd. Eventually, it was their turn. The car rolled smoothly into position. "Hey, isn't that one of those 1-in-100 Ferraris?" one of the photographers called out. "If they got that kind of money to throw around, they've got to be someone important," another whispered. The paparazzi waited eagerly, lenses aimed and ready, as two young men stepped out of the car and handed the keys to the valet. Just stand, wave, and then walk, Aaron instructed calmly as he positioned himself beside Max. He didn't do any waving himself. After all, he wasn't the important one here. In the middle of the media chaos stood a duo well known in the scene, a husband and wife photography team known as Hag and Daz. They had been in the business for over 7 years and were hard to miss, not just for their talent, but because they looked like total opposites. Hag was a short man with thick, round glasses, his camera always hanging around his neck. Meanwhile, Daz was a stunning woman, long-legged, with flowing brown hair and model-level presence. People often joke that Hag must have saved an orphanage in a past life to end up with someone like Daz, though no one actually knew the real story. As camera flashes went off, the two young men stepping out of the sleek red car instantly caught Daz's attention. "That's quite the flashy car for someone I don't recognize," she said, snapping a few photos. "Who are they?" "Don't waste your time," Hag replied, adjusting his lens without even looking. "Can't you see? Hardly anyone else is taking photos of them. No one's going to buy a story about some nobody." "Who is he, though?" Daz asked, keeping her eye on the taller boy in the red shirt. "He's the youngest heir to the Stern family fortune," Hag said flatly. "Wait, then isn't that kind of a big deal?" Daz asked, clicking off another quick shot. Hag looked up at his wife and sighed heavily. "You're pointing your camera at the wrong person." "What?" Daz blinked, shifting her lens slightly toward Max. "He's the heir." She felt a little embarrassed by her mistake. He didn't exactly look how she imagined a Stern heir would. She had pictured someone polished, groomed, maybe wearing designer everything. Max didn't give that vibe. "He's so far down the ladder, nobody pays attention to him," Hag explained. "Nothing remarkable. No big achievements. No spotlight. He's still in high school, too. So don't waste your time snapping shots of him." Still, as Max and Aaron made their way toward the glowing manor, something about the image stuck with her. His presence, his stride, the tension in his posture. "Maybe just one photo," Des said softly. She lifted her camera again and took the shot. As she glanced down to check how it turned out, something about the picture made her pause. There was something in it, something mesmerizing. "For someone so young, he sure has confident eyes," Des murmured, her gaze lingering on the photo she'd just taken. Meanwhile, Max and Aaron had entered through the grand double doors of the manor. Inside, they were greeted by well-dressed waiters offering trays of champagne. Aaron politely declined for both of them. Max couldn't drink anyway. Following the signs through the entry hall, they eventually reached the entrance to the main ballroom. Just before they stepped inside, two women stood to the right, clearly positioned to welcome arriving guests. "Thank you for attending the Kurt family's event," both women said in perfect unison. As they lifted their heads, Max immediately recognized them. "That's Sherry Kurtz. She really does look different when she's not in her school uniform," Max thought. His eyes then shifted to the woman beside her. "And that must be Sherry's mother." "Max, it's been quite a while since we last saw each other," Sana said, her voice smooth but slightly guarded. "I hope things won't be awkward between us." For a moment, no one replied. Sana stood expectantly, clearly waiting for something, an acknowledgement, a smile, anything. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. "I must apologize." Aaron finally broke the stillness. "Due to our tight schedule, we weren't able to bring a gift. We hope that next time, we'll have a chance to offer you something spectacular in return for your invitation." Instantly, Sana's smile faltered. Whatever charm she had been putting on dropped in a heartbeat. "Then why bother showing up at all?" she muttered with clear annoyance. "Even if it's just for formalities." Sherry glanced at her mother, her expression full of quiet embarrassment. "You're a fool, Max. Not even competent enough to bring a simple gift," Sana snapped, her words cutting sharp and cold. "I'll tell you this. If there's one good thing you ever did, it was calling off that engagement. You have no etiquette, no manners, and you're absolutely useless." Max had braced himself for backlash from the Sterns, but getting berated by the Kurtz had caught him completely off guard. Was a gift really that important? Still, as he studied her expression, something changed. Her eyes lit up instantly, her whole demeanor flipping like a switch. The fake smile returned. "Ah, who's my favorite Stern?" she sang, her voice now suddenly sweet. "It's so wonderful to see you, Chad." Ever since Aaron told Max he'd be attending this event, his biggest concern wasn't Sherry, his ex-fiancée, or whatever scheme her mother was plotting. No, the real problem had always been Chad. Now that Max knew the truth, that Chad was the one behind everything that happened at the school, it changed everything. He still didn't know who was responsible for the attempted drowning of the real Max Stern. But this guy, Chad, had caused nothing but trouble for him in his new life. "Why don't we move along?" Aaron said with a calm smile, gently guiding Max away. They shifted toward a nearby table, picking up small plates and nibbling on the arranged hors d'oeuvres. Max was grateful for Aaron's instinct. Even in this grand ballroom, packed with chandeliers and high-profile guests, there were still people with press badges walking around and cameras clicking in every direction. Still, as Max picked through the appetizers, he couldn't help but glance back over his shoulder. There he was. Chad had arrived, sunglasses resting on the top of his head, his hair slicked back behind his ears, in a flashy yellow patterned suit that made him stand out like a neon sign in a black and white photo. You could spot him from anywhere in the room. "Mrs. Kurtz, it's so lovely to see you," Chad said, bowing slightly as he lifted her hand and kissed it with practiced charm. Then, turning to Sherry, he added, "And you look more stunning every time I see you." He took Sherry's hand and gave it a small kiss as well, smiling like he'd just stepped out of a romance novel. "I'm afraid I've been really busy as of late," Chad said with a sigh. "Things are getting tough within the Stern family, so I haven't had time to get you a gift. But I promise I'll bring you something special the next time we meet." "Oh, don't be silly," Sana giggled, gently slapping Chad across the chest like they were lifelong friends. "You don't have to get us anything. You being here is a gift enough." Max nearly spat out his drink right then and there, coughing hard and drawing attention from several nearby guests. He clutched his chest as he tried to breathe, making quite a scene. Both Chad and Sana glared at him disapprovingly, while Sherry turned her head to the side, trying and failing to hide a small smile. "Are you all right? Did someone poison your drink?" Aaron asked, gripping Max's shoulders and looking around in fake alarm. "Calm down," Max wheezed, waving him off. "I just choked." I was shocked by the blatant double standard. These rich people, or the people sucking up to them, it's enough to drive someone mad. Trying to cool his head, Max walked away, deliberately avoiding Chad. As he wandered through the ballroom, he noticed all the items up for auction. Famous paintings, rare artifacts, and one-of-a-kind memorabilia were displayed with soft lights and gold tags. There were plenty of celebrities, too, faces Max recognized from the media, but they didn't impress him much. Celebrities had never meant much to him. What he was looking out for were underworld figures, just like the ones he'd spotted at the last Stern family gathering. But so far, no one like that had shown up. Not yet, anyway. "All of your family members have arrived, apart from Dennis Stern," Aaron said, standing just behind Max's shoulder. "Your grandfather's a bit too high profile to waste time on events like these." "I agree," Max muttered. "Have you seen the crap they're selling in here? And the prices people are putting on it? Even if I had the money, I wouldn't waste it on this garbage. Honestly, if I had the choice, I wouldn't have come either." "Well, it's probably a good thing all your family members are ignoring you," Aaron replied. "They seem way too busy trying to gain favor with the other guests." Despite already having ridiculous wealth, each Stern was chasing after more power, more influence, more status. But the one thing Max couldn't keep his eyes off all night was the performance being put on by Sana, Sherry, and Chad. It was infuriating. "What are you doing just following me around everywhere?" Sana hissed in a hushed voice. "You need to be with Chad, winning him over. Don't forget, everything we have is riding on this. I'll do my part for the family, so you do yours." With that, she practically shoved Sherry in Chad's direction. Chad was already talking to two other women, older, dressed in designer cocktail dresses, laughing and pouring him drinks. As Sherry stepped closer, the contrast between her and them was painfully obvious. She was still a high school student. They were adults. And Chad? A man in his mid-20s, charming and polished. Something about the whole scene made her stomach twist. Regardless of how she felt, Sherry reminded herself of her mother's words. She wasn't doing this just for her own sake. It's for the family. Taking a deep breath, she walked over to Chad, forcing a warm smile. "Chad, you seem to be having a good time," she said sweetly. "Are there any items tonight that caught your eye?" "Not really," Chad replied with a casual shrug. "There hasn't been anything I want to get, although I suppose there's been one thing. I guess you could say you." The two women beside him giggled, leaning into his shoulders with flirty smiles. Sherry laughed softly too, joining the act. And just like that, she found herself spending the better part of the night by Chad's side. Meanwhile, reporters Hag and Daz had made it inside the ballroom, their cameras hanging around their necks. For some reason, Daz found herself oddly drawn to a single individual. "Looks like he hasn't bid on anything," she muttered. "You'd think all the Sterns would have some pocket money to throw around." "I keep telling you, ignore him," Hag replied, not even looking up. "Right, but out of all of them, only two haven't bid on anything, Chad and Max Stern." Daz raised her camera and took another quick shot. There was something in Max's expression, focused, distant. He was clearly staring at someone. But who? Max had spent most of the evening ignoring the festivities, instead observing how everything played out around him. He watched Sana making her rounds, clearly trying to bring up investments for their struggling chain business. Judging by the tight smile on her face and the subtle clenching of her jaw, she wasn't having much luck, which explained why Sana kept glancing in a particular direction, right toward her daughter. Over the past hour or so, Sherry's face had gone bright red. Chad had been pushing drinks on her nonstop, despite her being underage, and she clearly wasn't handling it well. Her mother's just watching this, and she's fine with it? Max thought, his jaw tightening. Is it just me? Or do these people have even fewer morals than the ones in the underworld? By now, Sherry was slumped in her chair at the table. Chad walked over, grinning, and offered her yet another drink. "I'm sorry," she muttered, waving a hand weakly. "I don't think I can take any more. My head is starting to spin. I think I'm going to throw up." "Come on, you like me, right?" Chad said, sliding into the seat beside her. "We're just trying to have a good time. And for me, this is a good time. If you really like me, then you'll drink it." Sherry stared at the champagne glass. Just looking at it made her nauseous. As she glanced around the ballroom, her eyes met her mother's. Sana was watching, intently, silently. I have to do this. It's just one more drink. For the family. That's all it is, right?" Her hand began to reach for the glass, trembling. Chad leaned in closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, as if to help her. But it wasn't comforting, it felt suffocating. "Come on, bottoms up," Chad said smoothly. "After this, I'll take you somewhere nice, and we can cement our relationship." Sherry, still holding the glass, slowly raised it toward her lips, until a hand reached out and stopped her. "You shouldn't force yourself," the voice said gently, yet firm. "While your body's still young, it's important you take care of it, especially for a pretty woman like you." Sherry's vision was slightly blurred, her head light, but she looked up, trying to make out the person who had intervened. "Max," she murmured. Immediately, Chad stood up, his chair scraping sharply against the floor. His jaw was tight, teeth clenched. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded. The ballroom, where the auctions were taking place, was massive. At least 600 guests filled the space, constantly moving from one area to the next. Between the chatter, the waitstaff, and the auction calls, most people didn't even notice when something unusual happened. Most people, but not Daz. From the very beginning, she'd been focused on something entirely different. Sure, the other reporters chased trends, snapping photos of the usual celebrities and high society drama. But the ones who made a name for themselves, the ones people looked up to and remembered, they set the trends. They captured moments no one else noticed. And that's exactly what Daz was hoping to do tonight with Max Stern. "Oh, he's finally moving," Daz said, her eyes narrowing behind the camera. She had been watching Max closely the entire time, noticing the tension in his posture, the way his jaw clenched, his knuckles tightening. Now that he was walking, headed somewhere with purpose, her heart skipped. Something's about to happen. "Hey, looks like I might have found something after all," Daz whispered. "Well, they're some of the youngest in the Stern family. It's no surprise there's some drama. If anything, I feel bad for the poor girl. Hag said, shaking his head. Sherry Kurtz, right? Des asked. She's the daughter of Sana Kurtz, who's hosting all of this. Right? Hag replied, glancing in their direction. So, do you know why the tension between them is so thick? Des shook her head. I know the Kurtz family ran into financial trouble after Sherry's father passed away. He was a people's person, someone who could charm anyone into believing in him. He had a way of convincing others he'd succeed and pay them back if needed. But when he died, all of that trust vanished. The Kurtz family's influence crumbled, and now they're struggling. Exactly, Hag said. That story only got brief coverage in the news. But there was something interesting about Sherry. As you said, her father was that persuasive. So persuasive, in fact, that Dennis Stern agreed to let the youngest Stern heir, Max, marry Sherry. But after her father passed, her mother called the whole thing off. It's not hard to guess why. Without the father, there was no benefit in tying their family to Max. Daz nodded slowly, the pieces starting to click. No wonder there's tension. Maybe Max still had feelings for Sherry, or maybe it was something else. Either way, it made things a lot more interesting. For someone who told me to stop focusing on Max, Daz smirked, you sure know a lot about his life. I'm just covering all angles, Hag replied coolly. Chad had stood up from his seat now, locking eyes with Max across the table. What are you doing here, Max? He said, his voice sharp. Try to ruin my night? Sticking your nose where it doesn't belong? It's a fundraising event, Max replied, keeping his tone steady. On behalf of the Kurtz family. And I don't think getting their underage daughter so drunk she can't stand is a particularly smart move, especially after she already told you no. No? Are you saying I'm forcing her? Chad shot back. She could do what she wants. I'm not exactly shoving drinks down her throat. Max scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. But you might as well be, he said coldly. You know exactly what her position is, right? I know you probably took your IQ test in the bathroom stall of a McDonald's, but I didn't realize you were this dense. You know the kind of power your position gives you over her. Chad's lips curled into a smile as he leaned in close, whispering into Max's ear. And is there any problem with that? He murmured before pulling back. Women flock to us the moment they realize we're Sterns. That's just how it is. Every relationship is a give and take, so I take what I want, and they get what they want in return. I don't see the issue. Sherry's only talking to me because she wants my money, right? Then why shouldn't I have a little fun? It's not like she has other options. He laughed, loud, smug, and unbothered. But his laughter was cut short. Sherry stood up, reaching for Max's forearm. Her fingers curled around it, and Max instantly felt it, how tense his entire body had become. He's right, Sherry said softly. And I'm fine with it. Her head was lowered, her voice barely a whisper. But Max saw it, a single tear that slid down her cheek and fell silently to the floor. What are you still doing here? Chad scoffed. She already told you. She knows exactly what's going on. Thankfully, she's one of the more honest ones. Hey, I got an idea, Max. Since you're so generous, why don't you use your money to help her? He leaned in again, his voice barely above a whisper. All right, I forgot. You can't touch any of that money, can you? If you can't use it, might as well hand over to me. Chad started laughing again, mechanical, smug, and completely unbothered. You could try to hit me again like last time, he said, his voice calm but condescending. But it won't change a thing about your situation, Max. He didn't say the next part out loud, but echoed in his thoughts like a victory chant. I own you. Across the ballroom, Sana had noticed Max stepping in between Sherry and Chad. Her brows furrowed, concern, or perhaps annoyance, flashing across her face as she started to march over. Only for someone to suddenly step in her way. Excuse me, ma'am. Would you like a drink? Aaron said, holding out a tray with perfect poise. Sana moved to step around him, but Aaron smoothly blocked her path again. Or perhaps some snacks? He offered cheerfully. Since you're hosting, it's only right I help serve you. Every time she tried to sidestep, Aaron was there, smiling, polite, and perfectly in her way. And because of the guests watching nearby, Sana was forced to bite her tongue rather than snap at him. Max, Aaron thought, his eyes never leaving Sana. I'm leaving this to you. Remember what I said, don't act out. Not here, not when everyone's watching, at least not in public. What had become painfully clear during their exchange was this. Chad still had no idea Dipter had already been dealt with. The threat he once held over Max's head no longer existed. All that cocky confidence? It was hollow. But ironically, Chad was bluffing in his own mind, too. As far as he was concerned, Dipter had slipped out of his control. He believed the fear he'd planted in Max was still alive and well, unaware of everything that had happened since. Instead of replying, Max turned toward Sherry. He gently moved her hand off his forearm, then took both of her hands in his. I want you, for just a moment, to forget what anyone else wants, Max said softly. I want to ask you, what do you want? If you want to stay here, to stay with Chad, then I won't stop you. But if you want to leave this situation, if you want out, then I'll help you. I'll support you completely. This time, I just want to know what you want. What I want, Sherry echoed faintly. The words, so simple to Max, hit Sherry like a tidal wave. The last person who had ever asked her what she wanted had been her father. And ever since he passed, not once had anyone asked again. It had always been her mother, drilling into her what was best for the family, for the business, for her father's legacy. But right now, her mother wasn't by her side, whispering commands in her ear. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was that brief space to breathe. But in that moment, something stirred inside her. She lifted her head, just a little braver than before. I want to get out of here, Sherry said, her voice trembling, eyes sparkling with unshed tears. Without hesitation, Max gripped her hand and began leading her away, pulling her out of Chad's reach, out of the ballroom, and away from everything. Sherry, Chad shouted after them. I'll remember this. That decision you just made, it's going to affect you for the rest of your life. Max felt Sherry's hand tense in his. She shuddered, the weight of Chad's words hitting her, but he didn't stop. He held her hand tighter and kept walking until they were gone from the room. Back inside, Sana finally managed to push past Aaron by physically forcing her way through. But it was too late. She arrived just in time to see the sour expression on Chad's face. Chad, please, don't be upset, Sana pleaded. Sherry's young. She's just being manipulated by that awful Max. She'll understand, eventually. She will. She reached out to grab his hand, but Chad snapped his arm away, flicking her off and storming off without a word. Outside the manor, on the stone patio of a sprawling garden, Max and Sherry stood alone. The area, often used for weddings, was quiet now. Just stone under their feet and moonlight on their shoulders. Hedges framed the back garden and led out into open field beyond. Sherry leaned forward onto a small balcony railing, staring out into the open dark. The air was cooler out here, and for a second, it felt easier to breathe. Max, what did I just do? She whispered, turning around. And then the real tears came. She didn't even realize she was falling until her head gently leaned against his chest. Max didn't push her away. He didn't embrace her either. He simply stood there, letting her lean on his chest. You were just honest with yourself, Max said quietly. You did what you wanted to do. I know. Sherry sniffled, rubbing her head before pulling away slightly, her cheeks flushing as she realized what she'd just done. I never wanted to do any of it, she said, her voice shaking. I never want to talk to Chad or suck up to him. Everyone can see how much of an asterisk hole he is. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. But I had no choice. I don't have a choice. If we don't get money soon, the business will fail. We'll lose our house, all our belongings, everything my father built. It'll all be gone. If our family loses the business, she whispered, turning her back to him as she sobbed again, it'll feel like I've lost everything I had left of him. Max walked over and stood beside her, resting his hands on the cool stone railing as they looked out at the empty fields. Stupid adults, he muttered. They've put all this weight on your shoulders and don't even realize it. This isn't something you should have to deal with, not like that. I don't know who your father was, what kind of man he really was, Max continued, his voice steady. But if he loved you, if he really cared, then I bet he'd rather watch the business fall and burn to the ground than see his daughter being dragged through all of this. He wouldn't want to save his legacy by selling his daughter. Max's words had settled something deep in her heart. Maybe that was how her father would have seen things. But she couldn't say the same for her mother. the only family member she had left. Still sobbing, overwhelmed by the emotional storm inside her, Sherry walked over to a nearby bench just outside the manor. She asked Max to come with her, just to stay close, for the company, for the comfort. She cried until there were no more tears left. Her body felt heavy, but lighter at the same time. Eventually, she leaned her head against Max's shoulder. "Thank you, Max," she whispered at last. "Thank you for getting me out of that. You know, I used to think you were kind of dweeb. But now, that's twice you look kind of cool." "Twice?" Max chuckled. "Yeah," Sherry said, her voice soft and drifting. "Back when you were fighting in the classroom that day. I saw it all happen. I didn't really think too hard about it then, but I remember thinking you were kind of cool." Her voice began to fade as the mix of alcohol, emotions, and exhaustion started to catch up with her. Her eyes fluttered shut, and within seconds, she had dozed off on his shoulder. "You really helped me back then at school," Max said quietly. "So, I wanted to get you a gift, even if Aaron hadn't mentioned anything. I know I showed up empty-handed, but now I think I've just come up with the best gift I could possibly give you." Max reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "It'll be the kind of gift that makes sure you'll never have to deal with Chad or situations like that again." The next day, Sherry let out a long moan as she twisted and turned in bed. The bright ray of sunlight piercing through the curtains hit her face, forcing her to squint. Slowly, her eyes cracked open, only making the pounding in her head worse. Where am I?" she groaned, clinging to the edge of her quilt. Looking around, the space felt familiar because she was in her own bedroom. How did I even get here? I can't remember anything from last night. Bits and pieces started to resurface. The fundraising event, the drinking, the tears rolling down her cheeks. And then Max. Her eyes widened as the final memory clicked into place. Immediately, she yanked the sheets over her head and curled into a tight ball. No, no, no. I cried in front of Max, she thought, mortified. And I cried so much. I leaned on him. What was wrong with me yesterday? Her face was burning. It didn't help that she still had no idea how she'd gotten home. But if she was back here, that meant something else too. Her mother was home. Sherry and her mother still lived together in a luxurious apartment in the city. It spanned 2 floors, complete with a sea view framed by floor-to-ceiling windows. The upstairs housed their bedrooms, while downstairs was an expansive open-plan space. Kitchen, lounge, and dining area, all flowing into one. The calm silence of her room felt like a temporary shield, a break from whatever storm was waiting for her just outside the door. When she glanced at her clock, the numbers glowed back at her. It was already midday. "I guess Mom didn't bother to wake me up for school," Sherry muttered to herself. "She must have seen how much I drank. I guess she understands." But the moment she thought of her mother, her heart started to pound. Her stomach twisted, sinking lower and lower. The dread weighed heavier than the throbbing pain in her skull, because this wasn't just a hangover. This was the fear of facing her. After what I did, she's going to kill me. She's going to kick me out of the house. I don't even know what's going to happen. Sherry curled up under the covers again, suffocating in her own panicked thoughts. All she'd had to do was one thing. One simple thing, and everything would have been fine. But her mouth was dry, her head ached worse than before, and she knew she couldn't stay in bed forever. Sooner or later, she'd have to face her mother. "It can't be that bad, right?" she told herself. "I mean, if it was, Mom wouldn't have brought me back home at all." Eventually, Sherry tiptoed out of her room and stepped onto the upstairs balcony that overlooked the open-plan living area. She moved quietly, hoping to hear if her mother was even in. That's when she heard it, a faint whistling sound. That's odd. I don't remember the last time I heard her whistling. Then something else hit her, the smell. The delicious scent drifted up from the floor below, and as she peeked over the edge of the balcony, what she saw confirmed it. Did Mom cook a meal for herself? And she's the one whistling? When was the last time that happened? None of it made sense to Sherry. Had her mother finally snapped after everything that had happened? Had she gone completely off the rails? Taking slow, cautious steps down the stairs, Sherry descended with her whole body trembling. And that's when Sana looked up and noticed her. "Oh, look who finally decided to wake up," Sana said, her voice chipper and bright. I made you a smoothie for your headache. Judging by how much you drank yesterday, I figured you'd be hungover. These smoothies used to clear them right up, remember? Sherry stepped into the kitchen, still stunned. Her mother, smiling, talking softly, food laid out on the counter, and the smoothie, waiting just for her. I figured you'd be feeling a little unwell, so I called the school this morning and gave them a heads up. You've got the day off. She sat at the island, staring at the smoothie and the meal. Part of her wondered if it had been poisoned. Nothing about this was normal. Mom, what happened yesterday? You seem to be in a really good mood, Sherry asked cautiously. I've been holding it in, but I just can't anymore, Sana replied, barely containing her excitement. It happened last night, a few hours after the event ended. The fundraiser itself was a success, no problems there, but honestly, I thought I had failed. I didn't manage to convince anyone to invest in the business. No matter what I proposed, it was like they had already made up their minds. But then, I received news a VC firm has decided to invest in us. In exchange for 50%, they're willing to clear all our debts and offer us a line of credit for whatever we need. Do you understand, Sherry? We're going to be okay. The family, the business, all of it, we're going to be okay, her mother exclaimed, rushing over and embracing her in a tight hug. In that moment, the two of them broke down into tears, but for the first time in a long time, they were tears of happiness. All the weight that had been pressing on their minds was beginning to lift. Does this mean I don't have to suck up to Chad anymore? Sherry asked, wiping away the last of her tears. Her mother looked away. The guilt was clearly eating at her, but she gave an answer. There's no need to do that anymore. Someone out there is really looking out for us. Despite the flood of relief, one question still tugged at Sherry's mind. She had been spared the worst of her mother's wrath, but that didn't explain everything. Mom, what happened yesterday? Sherry asked. Did Max call you to come get me? Did he say anything? Max Stern, Sana replied, scoffing. Forget about that useless boy. You can forget about all of the Sterns. We don't need to worry about them anymore. Honestly, it's a good thing we don't have to rely on them. And Max Stern is not good enough for you anyway. None of them are. Sherry let out a small laugh, but she wasn't so sure about that. From a school fight to what he'd done at the event, he seemed pretty reliable. She kind of hoped she'd get to see him again. In the middle of her thoughts, something suddenly dawned on her. Wait, Mom, are you sure this isn't some kind of scam? What if they're trying to trick you just to get half the company? Sherry asked, her voice filled with concern. I'm very sure. You don't have to worry about that, Sana answered. I already received the funds almost immediately. I was suspicious too, especially since they're a new VC I've never heard of before. It's something called Billion Bloodline. Strange name, right? But I had everything checked out. Everything's good. Sana then clapped her hands together, a surprising brightness still lingering in her mood. Honestly, the deal they offered is more than generous and definitely in our favor. I'm sure someday we'll get the chance to meet the chairman of the company, and when that day comes, I'll make sure to thank them properly. No matter what, Sherry, remember this, we are in their debt. The fundraising event had turned out to be quite the evening, but not in the way Max had originally imagined. He had gone in with certain expectations, hoping to uncover answers, maybe even stir up some trouble. But instead, it had left him with more questions than anything else. There were a few things he wished he'd gotten out of it. For one, he wanted to know if the White Tiger was more intertwined with the world of the wealthy than even he had realized. But not a single White Tiger member showed up. In fact, no gang members at all had been present. The second thing he had hoped for was some kind of clue, some signal, as to which family member might be out for his blood. Chad had practically screamed hostility from the moment they met. It wasn't a surprise that he was behind Dipter, not at all. Still, Max had hoped to see someone slip up, to catch a glance or a whisper that revealed more. But at the event, it was like no one even cared he was there. Maybe they were all too preoccupied. Maybe they were just playing it smart. But if someone truly wanted him dead, wouldn't they have acted by now? Third, and perhaps the most unexpected of all, was how surprised he was at himself. How well he managed to stay calm around Chad. Sure, he wanted to punch him, maybe worse, but he didn't. And that restraint only left the question growing larger in his head. Why was Chad so obsessed with destroying him? Why go to such lengths? Max still didn't have the answer. But at least there was one thing that came out of all this. As Max buttoned up his school uniform and stepped out the front door into the cool morning air, he reminded himself of the one solid result. Aaron managed to set up the company I asked for, Billion Bloodline. That's the name I've chosen. It represents my new group, my fortune, and everything connected to it. Now that I'm part of this world of wealth, I'll use it. I'll carve out my space. And soon, that name will echo, feared in the underworld and respected in the business world. While walking down the street, Max couldn't help but smile at himself, remembering what he had done. I think that Sherry and her family will be pleasantly surprised at the gift that I handed to them. Now I don't have to feel bad, but doing it through the company rather than myself is the best decision. The world can't know who runs the Billion Bloodline. That way the name of the organization will carry more weight, and I want to see something else as well. Max looked at his phone and the last transaction. 10 million. It was the money that had been sent to the Kurtz for 50% of their business. 2 million of it was a line of credit for them as well. It's the first time I've used a large amount of money, so now we can see if it really will cause a problem or not, or whether or not using the money was just a threat from Chad. Max thought. Finally, he had reached the outside of school. Things will be different now at school as well. Without Dipter, it's going to be a whole different place. Inside the cube, Chad was standing on the edge of the second floor and looking out of the nightclub. During the day, it was closed and wasn't used for much, but what people didn't know was the place doubled as his home. There was a third floor which he slept in, mostly during the day, since at night he would either be down in the nightclub himself or at some type of hotel somewhere else. His lifestyle was one that many found it hard to keep up with. They say the best way to cure a hangover is to drink it away, Chad said as he took a sip of his whiskey and then started to swirl it around. He was still thinking about what had happened last night. I can't believe that damned Max. If only Dipter was still under my control, then he would have been beaten today within an inch of his life. Chad said, I wonder, what should I do? What can I do to change the situation? Even if I go after that girl of his, how can I play it all into my hands? Just then, his security guard had walked in through the door. He had a bandage around his neck. He had been quite badly hurt during his fight with Dipter, but Chad didn't change his security. He couldn't. I have some news to report to you, the security head said. It appears that a venture capitalist firm has decided to invest in the Kurtz family's milk tea business. Immediately, Chad turned around. What? Someone actually invested in that dying thing. They were riddled with debt. The interest was eating into their profits. It made no sense for anyone to invest unless they were willing to take over their debts. It would be 10 years until anyone would see any profit from that thing. What firm would be stupid enough to do such a thing? Chad shouted. The guard paused for a moment as he allowed Chad to get his anger out. The firm's name is Billion Bloodline. Their records are kept hidden, and we can't access anything publicly as they seem to have only just recently started to be active, but they're the sole company that had invested in the company. In anger, Chad spat on the ground as he kissed his teeth and went back to look out at the nightclub. They invested the whole amount. No one would do that out of the goodness of their heart, and for it to have happened right after the fundraising event. Was it someone at the party? But no one would be stupid enough to do that. Chad continued to moan. Oh well, I guess that means the two of them will no longer be sucking up to me. It was fun to drag them along while I did. I wonder if they ever realized that they were never going to get a penny from me no matter what they did. It's just a shame I never got to go so far with her. There is one more piece of information that I would like to give you, the guard said. Chad raised his hand to allow him to continue. It's about Dipter. It appears him and the core members that made up his group, all of them have been sent to a juvenile detention center. It appears there was an incident. Chad's grip loosened on the glass, and it smashed against the floor. You said Dipter sin juvie. No, that means. The packages, this is bad. This is really, really bad. I have to get to Max. I have to find him now. School life had completely changed, and it wasn't just true for Max. It was true for the entire school. After catching up with Aaron, Max had learned what had happened to Dipter and a few of the others who had been with him. The packages they'd been caught with were enough evidence to pin everything on them and land them behind bars. Because of their age, they'd been sent to a juvenile detention center. And it wasn't just Dipter. Many of the school's class leaders had gone down with him. Snide and Co., to name a couple. The police hadn't managed to catch everyone, but that was never Max's intention anyway. He only wanted to take down those responsible for what had happened to Sam and to the real Max. In a lot of ways, he'd done just that. The ones who hadn't ended up behind bars were back in school, but the atmosphere had shifted. The story of what happened that day had spread fast. One of the bullied kids had finally fought back, and somehow he'd won. Without Dipter backing them, and with some students finally facing consequences, no one was acting out anymore. The school had gone quiet. As Max sat at his desk, half focused on the day's lesson, he glanced at the seat beside him, still empty, still untouched. "I'm sorry, Sam," Max murmured, "that you didn't get to experience this kind of life. I wish I'd done something sooner." With that, he rested his head on his desk and closed his eyes, letting himself drift into a quiet nap. There was a strange sense of accomplishment. His fists had actually done something good for once. It felt nice. When lunch break rolled around, Max was getting ready to grab something to eat when he saw Joe walking over. He was the only person in the class who knew the full truth about everything that had happened. "Want to grab something together?" Joe asked. "You're not going to make me pay, are you?" Max replied, raising an eyebrow. Joe immediately threw his hands up. No, of course not. Don't be crazy. It's just, forget it. If you don't want to eat together, that's cool. It's fine. We can eat," Max said, cracking a faint smile. "But you're paying this time." Back when Max and Sam were getting bullied, they had been the ones forced to pay for Co and his friends' meals. So honestly, it felt like the least Joe could do now. And as they walked, Joe realized something else. With Co and the others gone, there was no one left for him to talk to. Not in class, not in the whole school. He didn't have any friends. And the person he was closest to now was Mad Max. The two of them walked side by side, heading down the hallway toward the exit when they both froze. A tall figure was standing up ahead, waiting, and it was clear it wasn't a coincidence. "Max, I've been looking for you," Jay said. In Max's mind, he still owed Jay a favor for pulling him out of that mess with Snide. And since then, Jay had made quite an impression on him. So Max was willing to hear him out. "There's something I want to talk to you about," Jay said. "About this entire school. Will you come with me to the cage?" "The cage?" Joe repeated, surprised. "If it's a request from you, then sure," Max replied without hesitation. The cage was a location on school grounds, so Max didn't think much of it first. But the moment he stepped outside and saw what was waiting for him, he realized the situation might be a lot weirder than he'd expected. Standing around in the cage were a bunch of students, all talking among themselves. Some were playing dumb games and laughing loudly, while others were wearing slings and bandages, clearly part of the group that had attacked Max and the others not long ago. Jay, Max, and Joe stepped into the cage, and as soon as they did, the noise cut off. The students turned and stared at Max. No one said anything. They just waited for Jay. "Right here," Jay said, gesturing around them, "are all the school's delinquents. At least, the ones who used to be under Dipter." He paused, sweeping his hand toward the roughly 30 students surrounding them. "They're the ones willing to hear out my proposal. Our school, Max, it's different from the others," Jay began, his voice steady but heavy. "And I don't know if you've realized this, but it's the kind of place where scum like us are free to run wild. A school where people like us, we don't really have a future." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd around them. Before Dipter showed up, a lot of the local street groups used to keep an eye on this place. They'd scout for potential fighters and recruit them straight into their gangs. "These kids accepted it," he added with a shrug, "because, truthfully, there wasn't anything else for them. I was in the same spot myself." Max understood exactly what Jay was talking about. He'd heard rumors of street-level gangs recruiting directly from schools, but always sounded too extreme, too far removed from reality. That was before he'd experienced firsthand just how rough things really were for some of the students here. "It wasn't just this school either," Jay continued. "The local schools around here would constantly go after each other, starting fights to prove who was the best, who was the strongest. But it was all for show. Just a way to prove to the people on the streets that we were worth bringing in." Jay's hands clenched slightly as he spoke. But when Dipter came along, he changed everything. Instead of us fighting each other or other schools, he wanted to build something right here. His own group, his own gang, something that could protect us. Jay glanced at Max, his expression serious. And I liked that idea. I really did. But in the end, there was still one thing the street gangs could offer that Dipton never could. Do you know what that is? There was a pause, but even Joe knew the answer. It was the money, Joe said. Dipter had a wealthy client. He practically turned the school delinquents into a mercenary group for hire, and he paid them all. Max already knew exactly how that client had the funds to hire them in the first place. Jay took a step forward. I've gathered everyone here because, Max, after seeing everything you did, we need someone to lead us. Someone to protect us from the other schools. With Dipter gone, things are already starting to stir up. He hesitated, then added honestly, but I'll be real with you. Without some kind of payment, I don't think we can stop them from walking away. Jay's eyes locked onto Max's, his voice unwavering. If you can solve that problem, then every single person here will follow you, just like they followed Dipter, including me. A few voices rose from the group in support, chanting, hyping up what Jay had just said. Now I get it, Max thought. It was never about blind loyalty to whoever was strongest. It was about survival, about choosing the best option they had, the best opportunity. If I can build this group from the ground up, this might be the weapon I need to go after the white tiger. And it starts right here. Max smiled and placed a firm hand on Jay's shoulder. Don't worry about the money, he said confidently. Money's not a problem. Whatever Dipter was paying you, I'll match it. With that, Max turned and looked out at the crowd of students, all eyes now fixed on him. Everyone here has a choice, Max shouted, his voice ringing through the cage. You can choose whether to stay with me, stand by me, and live a better life starting tomorrow. He paused, letting the silence build before continuing. You'll be rewarded for your loyalty, but if you stab me in the back, then I promise a fate worse than death will wait for you. But if you stay, you'll achieve things beyond your imagination. This doesn't have to stop at school or street gangs. That's just the beginning. The students listened, stunned. No one had ever spoken to them like this before, not with this kind of power or confidence. And somehow it was working. It was inspiring. If you leave now, I won't remember you, Max said. And no one else in this world will care what you do. But for everyone who stays, you'll become part of something new. A new name, a new force. He raised his voice, loud and clear. You'll be part of the billion bloodline. If anyone else had said those words, it might have sounded like some cringy fantasy from a middle school kid trying too hard. But coming from Max, with the strength he'd shown, with everything he'd already done, it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded real. Very well, Max said, after seeing that no one had left. You're no longer just student delinquents. You're no longer some stupid playground bullies. His eyes swept across the group. Each one of you is now a member of the billion bloodline, and you'd better remember it. Having just found out that Dipter was in juvie, Chad went into full panic mode. Sweat was already dripping down the side of his face, and his skin felt clammy like he was burning from the inside out. Dustin, we have to move now. We have to find Max Stern. I need to figure out some way to... He couldn't even finish the sentence. The words caught in his throat like static. But even without saying them, Chad was already moving, storming toward the door. His head of security, Dustin, didn't hesitate to follow. The two of them rushed down the stairs, footsteps loud and quick. At this time of day, Max should still be near the school, Dustin said. But we won't be able to just blindly enter the premises without a solid reason. I could try to convince the principal to let us in. I don't care, Chad snapped. Force your way in if you have to. It's just a regular school. If that doesn't work, then fine, we'll wait for him. But we're not leaving without seeing Max. They were halfway across the dance floor, almost to the exit, when the doors suddenly burst open with explosive energy. The two guards stationed inside jumped forward, but before they could even react, both were slammed backward, flung across the room, and sent skidding across the polished dance floor like rag dolls. Chad, a voice called out. A tall man stepped through the open doors, wearing a striped shirt, a fitted waistcoat, and a tall black top hat perched on his head. On either side of him were two men, both wearing berets. They weren't trying to hide. They were making a statement. "It appears you were in quite the rush to leave," the man in the top hat said coolly. "Did you know I was coming? Were you trying to escape me?" Several of the guards inside the nightclub, what was left of Chad's personal security, immediately sprang into action. The two who'd been thrown aside were already getting back on their feet, injured but still willing to fight. More guards moved in, surrounding the trio. "No, wait. Stop," Chad shouted, throwing out his hand. These men were his own, loyal and battle-scarred. They'd already taken hits from Dipter and his crew, but they hadn't broken. Not yet. They were still able to fight, still able to protect. However, Chad knew the truth deep down. If his security team couldn't handle Dipter, then they had absolutely no chance against these people. Before the guards could even rush forward, a large group of men, at least 20, entered the nightclub behind the first three. Each of them wore the same signature beret, moving in with precision. The sight caught the guards completely off guard, but instincts kicked in, and they tried to fight back. The newcomers moved swiftly, weaving around the incoming attacks with practiced ease. With smooth, coordinated movements, they struck kicks to the legs and knees, sharp hits to the sides of their faces, taking each guard down in seconds. It was clean, clinical, efficient. Dustin stood frozen in disbelief. The high schoolers from earlier had managed to take down his train team, but at least that had been a struggle. This was something else entirely. These men were operating on another level, making the entire thing look effortless. What shook him even more was how perfectly synchronized they were, moving as if they'd been trained to operate like clockwork. "Who are these people?" Dustin asked, his voice low. "They're a street gang," Chad answered, his voice dry and tight. "The man in front, he's called Chrono. He's their leader. The group's known as the Rejected Corps." "A gang?" Dustin blinked in disbelief. "This is who you've been dealing with?" "Correct," Chad replied, eyes fixed on Chrono. "But they're not just any gang. Their name carries weight because every single one of them is ex-military, all kicked out of their units for one reason or another. We don't stand a chance against them." Chrono, the man at the front, was easily the best dressed among them. Striped shirt, polished waistcoat, and that unmistakable top hat. With his sharp eyebrows and calm expression, he looked more like a businessman than a gang leader. His hands were spread casually at his sides as he strolled forward. "You know," Chrono began, circling Chad like a hawk, "I was quite disappointed when I heard that our product never made it to any of our customers." His tone was smooth, but every word carried a quiet threat. "So I looked into it. I was hoping, just hoping, that maybe I could still recover it. But as it turns out," he paused, raising an eyebrow. "The students you used? They've all been locked up. And the product." He stopped in front of Chad. "Now it's in the hands of the police." "Dipter was his name, right?" Chrono said, his voice oddly casual. "I really like that kid. You know, I had my eye on him. We have a rule in our group. We only take in those who are like us. But he was different. Special. So special. I was even willing to make an exception." He paused, his tone sharpening. "So now I have to ask, what the hell went wrong?" Chrono stopped walking and turned, locking eyes with Chad, expecting a straight answer. "I have no idea." Chad blurted out, panicked. "I just found out about it seconds ago. I swear. I didn't know Dipto lost the product or anything like that. I was on my way to figure it out myself." "Oh, I see," Chrono replied smoothly. "And I can tell you're telling the truth." He gave a cold smile. "Because if you weren't, I'm sure I would have gotten a call from you first, right? That would have been the smart thing to do." Chrono's smile disappeared. "After all, let's not forget you owe us. You're swimming in debt, Chad. That's the only reason you're working for us. And now, thanks to this little disaster, your debt just got bigger." With a snap of his fingers, Chrono gave the signal. The men in berets began exiting the nightclub one by one, silent and disciplined, until only the two flanking him remained. "Don't worry about finding out what happened," Chrono said calmly. "We'll handle that. Someone decided to mess with our business. So now, we'll either find a new supply route or eliminate the problem." He stepped closer again, eyes never leaving Chad. "Truth is, Dipter had already come to us. He asked us to cut you out, wanted to work with us directly. We had a deal. Everything was set. and now it's ruined. Chrono tilted his head slightly, mock curiosity flickering across his face. Makes me wonder, did you find out? Did you try to sabotage it? He took another step forward. Chad instinctively raised his hands, shielding his face, flinching like a man expecting a punch. But it didn't come. No, it couldn't have been you, Chrono said, turning away. You wouldn't dare make a move. He glanced over his shoulder one last time, voice low and final. After all, we both know the truth, Chad. The Stern family can't protect you. Or rather, they won't. School had ended, and Max was already laying the groundwork for something new, something he would call the Billion Bloodline. If he wanted to uncover the truth about what happened inside the White Tiger, he couldn't just rely on others. He had to build a group powerful enough to face them head-on. Something of his own, hiring a security team or outsourcing the job to another gang. That was never going to work, especially for someone like him. Too many questions would be raised. People would doubt his legitimacy. And more often than not, those who were hired ended up betraying their clients anyway. Even when he'd visited a group like the Pit, things could have easily gone sideways. No one ever really knew who was backing who. Street gangs were unpredictable. Loyalties were bought and sold every day, and money alone was never enough to guarantee safety. That's why Max had decided to create something new from the ground up. And this was just the beginning. In high school, the only thing I can rely on is what I'm building now, Max thought, heading down the hallway toward the gym. It was time to fall back into his routine. In the past, his old body, his old experience, would have been more than enough to take down someone like Dipter. He wouldn't have needed to rely on underhanded tricks. Thankfully, Dipter had believed he was several levels above Max in every way, and that arrogance had led to his downfall. It's going to take time to get my body back to what it used to be, Max thought, but maybe I need to focus on more than just strength. Maybe I need to learn something new, too. Back in the day, when Max rose through the ranks, he'd done his fair share of fighting. But the higher he climbed, the less he had to do it himself. As the White Tiger transformed from a local street gang to a full-fledged organization, he started relying more on others. They had used smaller gangs to do their dirty work. And once they evolved into a true syndicate, they hardly lifted a finger. Maybe that was my biggest mistake. Getting too comfortable, too complacent, Max thought. If I had stayed sharp, even those who betrayed me wouldn't have been able to lay a finger on me. He wasn't much of a boxer, though. And while Steven was definitely skilled, Max knew he needed to train beyond that level. He'd seen street gangs with members far more dangerous, fighters who made the people around him now look like amateurs. Which is exactly why I need to stay focused on my plan, Max muttered under his breath. I just hope my new Familito isn't get in the way too much. You look like you've got a lot on your mind, Joe said, appearing by his side. Guess that's what happens when you become the leader of an entire school. He let out a dramatic sigh. Man, all of them hanging on your every word. But hey, the best part? I'm getting paid more than the rest of them. That makes me like the sub-captain of the group, right? Max had been cautious about that. He hadn't increased the amount the other students were being paid. Not yet. All 30 members were still receiving the same deal they had under Dipter, $200 each per month. That had been Dipter's original rate. But Max knew the real problem wasn't now. It would come later. If I want the Billion Bloodline to exist beyond high school, Max thought, I'll need to start paying them real wages. Something they can live on. Running a gang, at least the kind of gang he was planning, was starting to feel a lot like running a business. Right now, with 30 core members, he was paying out $6,000 total every month. That was manageable, but Dipta hadn't treated everyone the same. Some of his more important members had earned more. One of them was Jay. His paycheck had been $1,000 a month. When Joe found out about that, he came to Max immediately, demanding a raise. And to be fair, Joe had been doing a decent job so far. Reluctantly, Max agreed. That meant, to keep the Billion Bloodline running in its current state, Max was paying out a total of $8,000 a month. Normally, with rent, daily necessities, and the cost of the gym they were now using, that would have put him way over the $20,000 monthly allowance he received from his grandfather. But things weren't exactly normal anymore. Finally, Max and Joe arrived at the gym. The metal shutter was already pulled up, and even from outside, they could hear the rhythmic thudding of someone hammering away at a punching bag. The hits were fast, sharp, heavy. Walking in, they spotted Steven right away. He was in his usual red jogging bottoms, shirtless, his gloves landing solid strikes on the bag with relentless force. He didn't stop, not right away. But eventually, as sweat dripped down his body and his breathing got heavier, he paused and glanced over at the two entering. "You're hitting that bag harder than usual," Joe said, raising an eyebrow. "What? You think it's going to spit out money or something?" Steven let out a half-hearted chuckle and walked over, wiping his face with a towel. "No, it's not that," he muttered. "I've just got a lot on my mind." He looked down at himself and shook his head. "After what happened last time, getting nearly taken out by a high schooler, I realized I've been slacking. Big time. I mean, look at me." Steven jabbed at his midsection, hitting the soft layer of fat that had formed over time. For a regular guy, he was still in solid shape. But it wasn't the body he used to have, the body of an athlete in his prime. "I'm kind of embarrassed by how it all went down," Steven admitted. "I can't let something like that happen again. I need to stay sharp. Stay ready." Steven paused, falling silent. It looked like he had more to say, something weighing on his mind. But before he could speak, the sound of the door opening pulled his attention away. Hey, what's he doing here?" Steven shouted, pointing toward the entrance. The person who had just walked through was none other than Jay Woods. "It's nice to meet you again," Jay said politely, bowing his head slightly. "I want to apologize for last time. Given the situation, we ended up on opposite sides, but moving forward, I hope we can work together. I believe we both have a lot we can learn from one another. You were strong, one of the strongest I've ever faced." Immediately, Steven's face turned red. He scratched the back of his head awkwardly, trying to hide the blush. "Well, at least you brought a polite one this time," Steven muttered. "Not like that damn Aaron, who's always trailing behind you." "But wait, what do you mean working together?" Before Max could answer, the gym door opened again. One after another, several students began walking in. They were a rough-looking bunch, most of them slinging their bags onto the floor without a care. A few were chewing gum loudly, and others were openly mocking the smell of the place. Max just smiled. "I brought you a group of brand-new customers," he said, motioning toward the students. "I want you to train every single one of them. Teach them how to fight." The students couldn't stop commenting on how run down the gym looked. Some openly questioned if there was any real benefit to being there at all. But before their complaining could get out of hand, Jay's voice cut through the noise. "Everyone, shut it and move," he barked. "Put your stuff over there and get changed. PE uniforms, same ones you wear for school." Now, it became immediately clear these students listened to Jay. Maybe not as much as they had listened to Dipter, but it was close. Once they returned, now in uniform, Steven gave a few quick instructions to Joe. Start them off with a warm-up, 10 minutes of running laps, then some basic hand-eye coordination drills. Steven watched them for a moment, then gave Joe a pat on the back before walking off. He was leaving the warm-up to him, at least for now. Joe had trained with Steven a few times, and that made him the best option for the beginning stages. But not everyone in the group was on board. "What the hell? Why should we listen to him?" one of the students muttered, eyeing Joe. "Isn't he just another delinquent from class? How's he supposed to teach us anything about fighting?" Joe spun around, instantly fired up. "Oh," he shouted. "Show some respect. Don't forget, I'm the guy who bested Co." He jabbed a thumb proudly at himself. "Who?" one student asked. "I think he was the head of one of the classes, part of that Power Ranger trio, or whatever." "Shut up," Joe snapped. "Look, I know I was weaker than Co, but because of this place, because of the training, I managed to beat him. So if someone like me can do that, then every one of you can too. So listen up." Behind Joe, Jay stood silently with his arms folded, watching. The students noticed and quickly started to straighten up. If Jay was backing Joe, then maybe it was time to stop complaining. Meanwhile, Steven had retreated into the back office. There was one old computer there, sitting on a dusty desk. Steven sat down and dropped his head into his hands, fingers tangled in his hair, looking like he was one frustrating breath away from ripping it out. "What's wrong? Is it because none of these guys are paying?" Max asked, leaning against the doorframe. "You know how much I pay for a membership, right? It's more than enough to cover all of them. In a regular gym, what would they be paying? $30 a month? You're still doing better than most." I know, Steven sighed. "You're paying me enough. And honestly, this whole setup would have been fine if this had all happened when I first bought the gym. But his voice trailed off. The truth was, Steven's debts had spiraled out of control. He'd taken out one loan to cover another, and the interest from all of them had stacked on top of each other like a crushing weight. Now, just barely scraping by with minimum payments on each one, it was a miracle he was even still standing. "I'm worried about what comes next," Steven admitted, eyes heavy. "I found out recently that this building, it's been bought out by a new landlord. And you know what usually happens next? They raise the rent. I'm already hanging by a thread here. If they increase the rent, then that's it. This place goes under, even with everything you've been paying me." Max listened carefully. He knew the amount he was giving Steven, especially with the bonus for taking out Dipter's crew, should have been more than enough, which meant there was only one possible reason why even a rent increase would be a disaster. Debts. Even with the bonus I gave him, Max thought he's still in deep. They must be massive. But there was another reason Max wasn't rushing to pay off Steven's debts. Control. Those debts were the only reason Max could keep Steven loyal. Without that leverage, without that pressure, Steven never would have agreed to fight by his side against Dipter and the others. Steven wasn't loyal to Max. He was loyal to the money, and because of his situation, that loyalty came with limits. Max understood that, which was exactly why it was best to keep things the way they were. Max reached out and placed a hand on Steven's shoulder. "Don't worry about it," he said with a calm smile. "I won't raise the rent. I'll just take it out of your paycheck instead." With that, Max turned and walked away, leaving Steven frozen in place. Still tugging at the sides of his head, Steven blinked as the realization started to hit him. "Wait, raise my rent? What's he talking about?" he muttered aloud. "That can't be right. Hold on, does that mean Max is my new landlord?" Meanwhile, Max strolled back onto the gym floor, watching the students go through their drills. Some were already throwing sharp punches, others shadowboxed with intensity. They had always enjoyed fighting, but now, with proper training, they wouldn't just be brawlers. They'd become feared. This is it, Max thought, pulling out his phone. The true beginning, the foundation of the billion bloodline. He opened his finance app, reviewing his recent spending and overall situation. "I get a $20,000 monthly allowance. Right now, the group costs me $8,000 and the gym another $10,000. But I'm now getting $2,000 back as rent. That just about balances things out for the month." Then he scrolled through his $1 billion fund, the pool of resources he was pulling from for his grand plan. "I spent $500,000 bribing the school board, enough to put the principal in my back pocket. Another $500,000 went into greasing the palms of key police officials. Everything else was handled by Aaron, and thankfully, that came at no extra cost. Then there was $10,000 to cover hospital bills, another $10,000 to legally set up the Billion Bloodline Corporation. After that, I bought 50% of Kurt's boba tea business for $8 million, along with a $2 million line of credit. And lastly, I bought this commercial building for $480,000. He sighed, scrolling down. "And don't forget the bonuses I handed out and the payment to the pit. Altogether, let's round that off at about $120,000. Then there was the gift to Sam's parents. Out of all the money, I still have plenty left. $987,380,000. The number flashed on Max's phone screen, an amount so large it didn't even feel real. It was more money than he could truly comprehend, and the craziest part was nothing had gone wrong since he started spending it. The commercial building, Kurt's boba tea business, all of it had been purchased through the Billion Bloodline Corporation. Now that everything was in place, Max could finally spend freely. No more careful tiptoeing. Things were going to change. Oh, and there it is. His phone buzzed with a fresh notification. -3,000,000. My latest purchase just went through, Max thought, eyes gleaming. How exciting. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, a small smile forming on his lips. This is going to be the start of something very interesting. The Stir Manor wasn't just large and luxurious. It was iconic. A one-of-a-kind estate with history carved into every stone wall and wooden beam. It was the kind of manor that rarely, if ever, came up for sale. And when it did, money alone wasn't enough to buy it. For places like this, the price wasn't determined by who could offer the most cash. If it were, the value would spiral into absurd territory, far beyond what the property was actually worth. No, buying a manor like this required something else: influence, power, a presence in the business world strong enough to pull the right strings and apply pressure in all the right places. And when it came to influence, the Stearns were unmatched. Currently, inside the grand meeting room of the estate, the same room where Dennis Stern would normally gather with his board of directors, there were only two people present: Dennis and Fred. Dennis sat at the massive, polished table, large enough to seat 30 people comfortably. Instead of working from his personal office, he had spread out numerous documents across the table's surface: files, printouts, charts, photographs. "I know everything's done digitally these days," Dennis muttered, running a hand along the edge of the table. "But I can't process things the same way unless it's all laid out in front of me. I need to see it." He reached out and picked up one of the files. Attached to the inside was a photo of Max, clipped neatly in the corner. Underneath it, several sheets of paper were stacked, each one filled with information. "Max, Max, Max." Dennis shook his head, staring down at the photo. "You spent so long ignoring the money, and because of that, I was curious. Genuinely curious what your first move would be." He leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. "But I just don't understand them." "Your heart's softening, Max?" Dennis muttered to himself. "Did you finally give in to the woman who left you to save her business? And then this, what's this nonsense?" He flipped through another page. "You've been buying up several commercial buildings. Fred, did you find out anything about these places?" "I did," Fred replied, stepping forward. "All the buildings he's purchased are within a 10-mile radius of his apartment. The land value isn't high, so the properties themselves are relatively inexpensive." He paused. "There is one thing all the buildings have in common." That caught Dennis's attention. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "They all contain gyms," Fred said. "A gym?" Dennis echoed, confused. "So, that's it? Max's grand plan is to open a chain of gyms? But none of them are in prime locations. The land isn't worth much either." He leaned back in his chair, expression shifting. Is he just trying to build something sustainable and quietly disappear? Or is he seeing something far beyond what we can understand, something years ahead? Dennis let out a small sigh and stretched out his hand for another file. This time, when he opened it, a photo of young Chad Stern stared back at him. Dennis's reaction was immediate. He shook his head in disappointment. "Out of all my heirs, the one I'm most disappointed in is him," Dennis muttered. "I didn't even foresee something like what happened to him. Maybe I should have kept a closer eye." "You gave all of them the same opportunities," Fred said calmly. "There's only so much you can do." Dennis didn't respond right away. Instead, he flipped the folder shut. "Have you managed to gather the rest of the data I asked for?" he asked, his tone returning to business. "I have," Fred replied, straightening up. "It's time for our monthly evaluation. And despite you always saying you prefer things on paper, you still asked me to do this." He pressed a button on the remote in his hand, and a quiet mechanical hum filled the room. A large screen began descending from the ceiling. Moments later, a projector beamed light across the room, casting a crisp display onto one of the manor's walls. Just like with the physical files, an image appeared in the corner. This time, it was Cece, Dave's daughter. "Cece hasn't spent much of the money at all," Fred began. "Outside of her own personal comfort, of course. She's bought a house, pays for gardeners, and has been looking into sustainable projects." Fred gestured toward the screen as details highlighted Cece's investments. "These are low-maintenance ventures, things she can manage with little effort while continuing to live comfortably on her own. It's fair to say she's one of the few who's chosen not to engage in the chaos surrounding the rest of the family." A warm smile spread across Dennis's face. Among all his grandchildren, he found Cece the most pleasant to talk to, mostly because her interests weren't centered around money or power. She had a calmness about her, something different. Still, for a man like Dennis, who loved talking about money more than almost anything else, her attitude was also a refreshing change of pace. "Next," Fred continued, tapping a key on his tablet, "we have Bobo, Karen's daughter. Her profile filled the screen. She spent a significant portion of her fortune, roughly $200 million. Dennis's brows lifted slightly. However, Fred continued, her spending has been smart. She's investing in herself, building her personal brand, even paying for her own publicity. She's also put money into several biotech companies. Fred paused, scrolling through a few more slides. If any of those companies achieve a breakthrough, it could lead to massive profits. Dennis leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing with interest. Out of all the heirs, he believed Bobo was the most intelligent. The issue wasn't her mind, it was how fast the money was moving. He glanced at the files again. Not all of it looked good. There were things Bobo had swept under the rug. Things that, if brought to light, could destroy her reputation entirely. It was good to be ruthless in business, but she hadn't been burned yet. That was a lesson she might come to learn eventually. Next, Fred continued, we have Karen, mother to both Chad and Bobo. As for her, she's lost most of her fortune investing in her designer brand and luxury malls. Dennis let out a quiet sigh. Then there's Dave Stern, Fred said, switching the slide. Currently, he's the chairman of a competing water company. He's lost some wealth trying to buy up your competition. A brave move, if I do say so myself. Dennis folded his arms, letting out a low chuckle. Brave or foolish, we'll see which. Fred moved on. Now we have Danto. Among the youngest heirs, he's made the most money so far. He's become what people call a social influencer. A video clip flashed briefly on the screen, Danto posing in front of exotic cars and branded workout gear. His following and lifestyle have led to several sponsorships, Fred explained. Not just in his sport, but in various other industries. Ironically, some of them are areas our own company hasn't tapped into yet. Dennis nodded thoughtfully. We also have Marcia, Fred added. She's founded a highly successful venture capitalist firm and has a sharp eye for investing in startups. Many of them have already turned a strong profit. And lastly, Fred said as he swiped to the final profile, we have Randy Stern. Out of everyone in the family, Randy has made the most income. Dennis's expression changed the instant Randy's name was spoken. He reached for Randy's file, opening it with tense fingers, only to find a single photo inside. No notes, no breakdowns, no paper trail. And it's the same as usual? Dennis asked, eyes narrowed. Fred gave a slow nod. The same as always, he said. We still have no idea where he's earning his money or what he's actually doing. The final slide of the presentation appeared on the screen, displaying a ranked list of the Stern family's financial standings, rounded to the nearest million, from lowest to highest. Right at the bottom were two names, listed with nothing but question marks. Max Stern? Figures not updated. Chad Stern? Figures not updated. Karen Stern, $490 million. Bobo Stern, $675 million. Dave Stern, $893 million. Cece Stern, $952 million. Danto Stern, $1,254 million. Marcia Stern, $4,465 million. Randy Stern, $12,126 million. At any point, these numbers could change, Dennis said, his voice quiet but firm. They have the money and the skill to make that happen. He paused, eyes locked on the screen. But I still haven't seen what I've been waiting for. Not a single one of them has surpassed me. Not yet. He stood up from his seat, the room suddenly heavier with tension. Eventually, one of them will, he continued. And when that day comes, when someone finally rises above me, I'll start worrying about the knives waiting to stab me in the back. He walked to the far end of the table and opened the final file, the one bearing his own name. Inside was a single photograph. Dennis Stern, $21,788 million.